Chapter 645. At night, the matches were in full swing. As the matches went on, the spectators became more and more excited. Dake was focused on watching the battles between the seniors when he suddenly heard Doran ask, "Dake, do you want me to help you find out who your opponent is?" Dake smiled elegantly and replied, "A duelist once said that the joy of dueling lies in the unknown. I don't completely agree with him, but I think he has a point." Doran blinked and said, "Enjoying fun is indeed important." But Dake quickly added, "Of course I only feel that way because it doesn't matter who wins or loses in the Golden Cup." But Doran didn't agree. "No, Dake. Why don't you set your sights higher? I mean the top 8, or the championship. Winning the championship of the Golden Cup in the second year, it's exciting just thinking about it. That's probably unprecedented, right?" Dake couldn't help but laugh. "How could that be possible? Don't even talk about Panduola. I can't even beat Winnie." Doran thought about it very seriously and said, "Senior Pandora might not be, but Senior Winnie, maybe it's possible?" Dake shook his head and laughed. "If I really win, then it's definitely because I'm lucky and Winnie is a black horse." Doran thought about it for a while and laughed. "Remember the URL. VIP, can't you?" VIP. The two didn't pay much attention to the conversation. Before the 6th duel began, Dake received an opening notification from the duel club. So he waved to the students next to him, bent over, and left the front row to enter the contestants' passage. His opponent this time was a senior in the 4th year, but probably because he had gotten used to it at the masquerade last night, he didn't feel much other than excitement. Compared to the 3rd year, the 4th year had more research on directional refining. Most of the top students in the 4th year had already grasped the knack of directional refining, which was of great help to the construction of the system. Moreover, their research on magic cards and props far exceeded that of the junior students. The only outstanding 4th-year student that Dark had ever dueled on stage was Angus Jeffrey, who was still a 4th-year student at that time. Although Angus Jeffrey had the talent and resources, he did not put enough effort into it. He couldn't represent the top level of the 4th year's top students. A true top student of the 4th year would have already grasped the directional training in the 3rd year. Moreover, they would have constructed a complete system at the beginning of the 4th year. After that, they would continue to improve and grasp more and more complex techniques. At this time, they would also have the spare time to refine magic cards specifically for the victory of the duel. All kinds of magic cards that were outstanding on the stage of the duel would be at their fingertips. The 4th-year seniors Dake was about to face were basically this type of students. It was normal for him to be stronger than Angus Jeffrey. It could even be said that Dake expected him to be stronger than Angus Jeffrey. After entering the passageway, they arrived at the other side of the passageway that led to the arena. Dake met the staff member who was waiting there. It was a 3rd-year senior with an apple face and a cute smile. He nodded slightly to this senior, and prepared to wait until the end of the 5th round in the evening before going on stage. However, the senior suddenly conjured a Diru Beast card from behind her. It was a card that simulated a duel. Then, she looked at him with bright eyes and asked eagerly, "Dimming Jr., my roommate wants me to help her get an autograph." Dake. After a moment of silence, Dake smiled normally and said, "Of course, no problem." Then, he wrote his name on the back of the card. Of course, if the senior wanted, he could also get the Diru Beast to personally sign it. This was not a troublesome matter. "I'm so envious." After Dake finished signing, a sour voice came from behind him. He did not need to turn his head to know that it must be the senior named Snake Harriman who came over. Snake Harriman was a thin and tall senior. He was also from the House of Nobles, and wore the standard uniform of the 4th-year House of Nobles. Although his face was slightly long and narrow, it was not ugly. Although this was the first time Dake observed him up close, for some reason, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He asked curiously, "Senior Harriman, have we met before?" Snake Harriman played with the little snake in his hand and smiled. "Of course we have met before. Don't we often bump into each other in the lounge in the tower?" Dake glanced at the little white snake and did not ask any more questions. However, Snake Harriman took the initiative to approach him and said, "I saw your duel with Elsie Kevin. I really did not expect that Elsie Kevin would still not be your match even after summoning an 8-star magical elf. Dake said, Elsie Kevin is a senior? He should have just cultivated the mechanical core not long ago and lacks more means to strengthen it. With the mechanical core, he can enter deeper into the underground city to obtain better resources and continue to improve his strength. Who knows, the next time we meet, I might not be his match. Snake Harriman shook his head and said, his ancient machinery card set has too many limitations. If he can't find resources related to ancient machinery in the underground city or have groundbreaking research results, it will be difficult for him to progress further. Unless he has the determination to cut his losses and abandon the ancient machinery card set that has already been formed and switch to a better route. Dake shook his head slightly and did not comment. Snake Harriman immediately changed the topic. I see that the composition of your deck is rather messy, and you have all kinds of magical elves. Although you can rely on the strength of your deck to keep winning, there will come a day when you reach your limit. I think you should also consider building a system. Dake smiled and said, actually, I am already doing it, but the mastery of directional cultivation is not easy. Senior, do you have any tricks? Snake Harriman laughed and said, there is no trick to directional cultivation. If I have to say, it would be reading books. Only with a huge foundation of knowledge can the path of directional cultivation be smoother. Thank you for your advice. Dake nodded, amused by Senior Harriman's correct nonsense. All right, it's time for you to go on stage. If you have anything to say it after you go on stage. The round-faced senior hurriedly urged. Dake and Snake Harriman walked out of the passageway together, and soon came to the edge of the duel arena, and separated into two sides. Dake was still on the red side, while Snake Harriman was on the blue side. After Dake went on stage, he waved to Yvette and the others in the audience as usual, then walked to the card table and activated the card set. His expression also gradually became serious during this process. Snake Harriman's words just now actually revealed a slight contempt for Elsie Kevin. However, his evaluation of Elsie Kevin hit the nail on the head. Elsie Kevin's current card set was built around the ancient machinery, but the path of the ancient machinery was not easy to walk, because it was basically impossible for him to obtain a second machinery core. The resources and knowledge related to the ancient machinery were also quite limited. If he wanted to continue on this path, he could only rely on himself to explore for the time being. In other words, Elsie Kevin's situation was actually very similar to Dake's situation at the moment. Dake's current card set was undoubtedly built around the Great Sin. If he wanted to continue on this path, he could only rely on himself to explore and research. However, the difference between him and Elsie Kevin was that Elsie Kevin still had the possibility of changing his path, but he could only walk one path to the end. Both contestants, get ready as soon as possible. The referee's whistle suddenly sounded. After Dake and Snake Harriman stepped onto the contestants' platform, they did not say a word. Both of them were fully focused on their preparations. And the commentator, Jessica Gardner, was giving them a brief introduction. As if to warm up, the audience's applause sounded as scheduled. And amidst the applause, the duel entered the second half of the preparation stage. And the projection of the preparation stage. Countdown appeared in the air above the arena. The contestants from both sides immediately drew their cards without saying a word. Dake had been paying more attention to duels recently, and he understood that in today's duel competitions, many duelists were very particular about the way they drew their cards. For example, praying to draw cards, orchid fingers to draw cards, left hand to draw cards and right hand to draw cards, 3 fast and 2 slow draw cards. Anyway, it was so mysterious that he did not know if there was an effect of drawing cards, but there was an effect of the shoal of course. He just drew 5 cards from the top of the deck very normally, and then put them in his left hand to check. Kettle Kettle, Fairy Puppet, Trash Slime, Bliss 3, Original Dragon Egg, an item card, a magic card and 3 magic elven cards. Dake glanced at the cards in his hand, and realized that there were not many connected cards in his hand this time. Even if he drew Bliss 3, there was no magic elven card that matched it. But it was not entirely true that he had bad luck with his cards. Kettle Kettle was invincible with 3 stars. Fairy Puppet could save his life. Original Dragon Egg was a magic elven card that blew up the game at the beginning. At this time, there were generally two ways of thinking. One was the simplest and most direct way of thinking, which was to directly summon Original Dragon Egg to blow up the game. The other was to consider whether the other party had a way to instantly kill the dragon egg, or if it was a trap. So let Kettle test the waters first. Dake frowned slightly and chose the first method, which was to directly summon. But this time, his method of summoning was slightly more particular. The 30-second countdown was about to end. On the blue team's platform, Snake Harriman did not try to hide his slightly feminine smile. Then, when the 30-second countdown was completely over, both sides began to summon at the same time. In the name of Dake Dimming, magic summoning, Original Dragon Egg. In the name of Snake Harriman, magic summoning, Snake Cage in the Fog. 3 seconds later, 2 summoning lights of slightly different colors shone into the summoning area of both sides. In the red side's summoning area, a huge white dragon egg quickly appeared. But unlike normal situations, Dake did not choose to place the magic elven in front of the magic ball, but unexpectedly chose to place it behind, using the magic ball to protect the magic elven. The commentator, Jessica Gardner, could not help but reveal a strange expression. This choice was not common. But if one thought about it carefully, the magic ball's magic power was as high as 8,000 points, and it seemed that it could indeed be used to protect the crucial magic elven from being instantly killed by a long-range attack. As she pondered, Jessica could not help but look at the blue side's summoning area. If Snake Harriman could not deal with it at the beginning, he was afraid that he would be in trouble immediately. But Snake Harriman himself did not show any signs of nervousness. He even smiled. As expected, Dake Diming's starter is usually this type of magic elven that needs to be activated. Although the activation time is very fast, this little bit of time is enough for me to complete the activation as well. In the blue side's summoning area, Snake Harriman's Snake Cage in the Fog was also summoned. It was a bamboo cage in the shape of a gourd about 1 meter tall. On both sides of the snake cage was a protrusion in the shape of a spout, and white smoke was rapidly emitting from the 2 spouts. But it was not a magic elven but a tool. Snake Harriman had chosen to summon a tool at the beginning. The white smoke emitted from the spout of the snake cage in the fog was spreading outwards at an extremely fast speed. 3 to 4 seconds was enough for this smoke to cover half of the blue side's summoning area. And 3 seconds later, Snake Harriman would begin his second summoning. The first round of summoning was always the fastest and most frequent. When the eggshell of the original dragon egg cracked open, both contestants began their second round of summoning almost at the same time. After Dake confirmed that the original dragon egg would not be attacked, he chose to summon Kettle. This was a very simple decision, using Kettle to defend, and then letting the hatched green-eyed baby dragon to attack. If the opponent did not have the corresponding countermeasures, the first round would be a death sentence for the opponent. But of course, it was impossible for Snake Harriman not to have any countermeasures. The smoke that covered half of the blue side's summoning area and was still rapidly rushing towards the red side's summoning area was proof of this. The height of the smoke was nearly 3 meters, and the blue side's magic ball and snake cage in the fog were completely shrouded by the smoke and could not be seen at all. This situation was obviously not what the audience wanted to see. After all, no one wanted to imagine the battle inside, while facing a cloud of white smoke. And as the duelist in the arena, what Dake needed to consider was whether this smoke contained poison. Normal poison was fine, but paralysis poison and hypnosis poison, these were even more fatal. Green-eyed baby dragon, Hall of Light. After summoning Kettle, Dake immediately gave an order. The green-eyed baby dragon, which had originally flapped its wings and leaped out immediately after hatching, and charged towards the opponent without hesitation, suddenly stopped in its tracks. Then, it clasped its hands together and offered up a prayer like a young girl. Gradually, the light attribute energy gathered above its head, and then it soared into the sky and exploded. As the feathers of light floated down, with the place where it stood as the center, the Hall of Light quickly spread out. But to Dake's surprise, the Hall of Light did not clash with the smoke. Yes, it penetrated the smoke without any hindrance, and continued to expand to the entire arena. And that smoke was completely unaffected by the Hall of Light, and it rolled towards the red side's area. Roar! The green-eyed baby dragon raised its head and roared. Before it was almost swallowed by the smoke, it flapped its wings fiercely, and a strong wind blew. But this smoke was obviously very special, and only the smoke within a few meters of its body was blown away. When it came back to its senses, it could no longer see its front, back, left, and right. On the red side's platform, Dake could not help but narrow his eyes. It was not that he did not have a way to get out of this predicament. He directly opened the Eye of Truth. Although he could not see through it, he could see the position of the magic conducting ball and the snake cage in the fog in the smoke. It was just that in the internal duels of the Shung Malian Academy, the students generally tacitly agreed not to use such methods outside the arena. And if he did not use the Eye of Truth, then there was only the established strategy of shifting the battlefield. Pull the magic conducting ball up into the air. Then let the green-eyed baby dragon fly up as well. The simplest and most direct strategy. Dake did not choose either of them. He stretched out his hand and pulled the red magic conducting ball up to the height of the platform. To prevent it from being ambushed by things that might be hiding in the smoke, Snake Harriman had obviously summoned a magic conducting spirit in his second summoning. But because of the smoke, he was unable to see the appearance of the magic conducting spirit clearly. And that magic conducting spirit had obviously received instructions beforehand, and it was silent. After pulling the red magic conducting ball up into the air, Dake chose to believe in the green-eyed baby dragon. Go, use your own sense of smell to fight. There were two meanings to the sense of smell. 1. The feeling produced when using the nose to distinguish smells. 2. The ability to distinguish between things. The former used the nose, the latter through perception. In a situation where the eyes and ears could not be used to search for the enemy, the green-eyed baby dragon's keen sense of smell would help it see through the fog. After receiving Dake's instructions, the green-eyed baby dragon quickly calmed down. It narrowed its eyes and its nose twitched quickly, capturing the special smell in the smoke. Suddenly, a fishy smell entered its nose. The green-eyed baby dragon took a step forward fiercely, and at the same time shook off the surrounding smoke. It grabbed into the smoke with its claws. Hiss! However, the vague shadow of a snake suddenly appeared in the smoke, and the green-eyed baby dragon felt its forearm being pierced by fangs, and its magic power was constantly being drained. A ferocious look suddenly appeared in its eyes, and with its right arm that was bitten, it grabbed the cold and smooth body of the snake. The delicate snake scales made it immediately realize that this was a snake. With an instant burst of power, the green-eyed baby dragon pulled the snake out of the smoke. Red eyes, white scales, and the thickness of a child's arm. Although this white snake was able to pierce through the green-eyed baby dragon's dragon scale defense, its own strength was very limited. There was obviously a mystery behind this. After the green-eyed baby dragon pulled the white snake out of the smoke, it stretched out its other hand, grabbed the tail of the white snake, and was about to tear it apart on the spot. However, when it exerted its strength, the green-eyed baby dragon suddenly raised its eyebrows and felt a malicious intent directed at it. That feeling was illusory, and the sense of smell, produced by the nose, did not have any effect. However, relying on the sense of smell, in its brain, it immediately detected the danger. However, the speed of the other party's attack was really too fast. Before the green-eyed baby dragon could react, it only saw a shadow moving in the smoke, and a transparent snake following closely behind rushed out of the smoke, biting its throat. Poochie! Those incomparably sharp fangs, without using any other means this time, easily bit through the green-eyed baby dragon's dragon scales. The green-eyed baby dragon wanted to use the same trick again, but it only saw that the transparent snake actually revealed its true form after it slashed down with its palm. That was actually a white python. Hidden snake? Dake suddenly recalled the person and magic elf he had encountered at the masquerade ball. In a daze, he finally recalled the source of that familiar feeling. So it's him. Snake Harriman was actually the Mr. Ghost, who had followed and stolen 5% of his credits. And the one that bit the green-eyed baby dragon's neck was the hidden snake that helped it to conceal itself. Card name, Hidden Snake. Type, Elf card. Level, Race Reptile. Attribute, Light. Magic power, 2400. Attack, 2700. Defense, 2100. Killing technique, Hidden Snake. Stealthy snake. Winged form, 6-star magic elf. Hidden Snake. With the passive killing technique, Stealthy Snake, it could maintain its stealth state when it was not attacked. With the escape type killing technique, Hidden Snake, it could spit out white fog to conceal itself and obtain the ability to teleport once. With the strengthening type killing technique, Winged form, it could grow wings of light and strengthen its own attack and defense to a certain extent. Dake had seen all three of these killing techniques before. This Hidden Snake was extremely practical and could protect the safety of a sorcerer in all aspects. It was a magic elf that was very suitable to be used in actual combat. And in a duel, it did not seem to be very suitable for high-end duels, because it only had one killing technique, Winged form, which was to increase its attributes. And its original attributes were not considered outstanding among the 6-star magic elves. However, being able to use the Misty Snake Cage for special summons was a very important point that made it suitable for magic duels. The other key was, how many more magic elves could Snake Harriman use the Misty Snake Cage for special summons? Also, how did the little white snake that was first pulled out by the young blue-eyed dragon come about? While Dake was thinking quickly, he ordered the young blue-eyed dragon that was being bitten and entangled by the Hidden Snake to activate the dragon's reverse scale. Roar! The young blue-eyed dragon suddenly roared, its eyes as red as blood. Its reverse scale shattered on the spot, causing it to enter a chaotic and violent state. The Hidden Snake's body was forcefully pushed open by it, and then the two dragon claws that broke free from its shackles fiercely clasped the snake's body. Its sharp claws pierced into the snake's flesh, and fresh blood flowed. Seeing that the Hidden Snake was in danger, Snake Harriman calmly gave the order. In the Hidden Snake. The Hidden Snake immediately let out a baby-like cry. That ear-piercing scream pierced straight through the eardrums, and was unbearable. White mist was spat out from its mouth, blending into the surrounding smoke. Then the Hidden Snake suddenly disappeared, and it actually used this to break free from the young blue-eyed dragon's violent attack. The Hidden Snake that escaped through teleportation did not use the feathered form that would expose its whereabouts. Instead, it continued to wander in the smoke, and the passive skill, Hidden Snake, gradually took effect, causing it to enter a state of stealth again. How is your young blue-eyed dragon going to find its enemy in a state of madness? Snake Harriman's voice was amplified through the loudspeaker, and it entered Dake's ears. Dake raised his head to look at him, but smiled and said, "Why isn't your Hidden Snake spreading its wings?" The Hidden Snake that did not use the feathered form naturally could not pose a threat to the magic conducting ball in the air. At this moment, both sides were actually on par with each other. However, Snake Harriman sneered slightly, pulled out the third magic conducting card, and suddenly summoned. In the name of Snake Harriman, magic conducting summoning, City Wall in the Fog. Suddenly, a ray of summoning light fell into the summoning area. However, when the light disappeared, there was no sound at all. The city wall in the fog silently fused into the fog. In the arena, only the angry roars of the young blue-eyed dragon were left. Battle Stage 2. 30s. The players from both sides reach for their cards at the same time. At this time, in the red arena, other than the young blue-eyed dragon, there was also Kettle. However, in order to not let the young blue-eyed dragon capture the target of its attack, Snake Harriman did not instruct the Hidden Snake to attack Kettle. He was waiting for an opportunity. He was very clear that after the young blue-eyed dragon transformed into a dragon egg, it had another stronger form. As long as the young blue-eyed dragon continued to maintain a chaotic state of madness, he could seal the sure kill skill dragon egg transformation, and he could also seal that stronger form in disguise. And with the two new magic conducting cards in his hands, he felt that he had grasped the opportunity in his hands. At the same time, Dake also looked at the two new magic conducting cards in his hands. Demon Fox Beast, Moon Godstone. When facing an opponent who could quickly summon a 6-star magic conducting fairy in the first round, He actually felt the pressure. There were many one-star magic conducting fairies among his magic conducting fairies. Even after these magic conducting fairies evolved using Great Sin 3, they would only evolve into 4-star magic conducting fairies. It would be difficult for them to compete with magic conducting fairies that were higher than 2-star. And if he wanted to change this, there was a way, which was to succeed a second time. As long as he could strengthen a 1-star magic conducting fairy to 3-star, the evolved form obtained using Great Sin 3 would naturally increase in strength. Maybe I should take some time to study it carefully. After this thought flashed through Dake's mind, he immediately took out the Demon Fox Beast magic conducting card and shouted anxiously, "In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon the Demon Fox Beast." Originally, the arena that was filled with smoke was not suitable to summon a magic conducting fairy that could not fly. But the Demon Fox Beast was an exception. As the figure of the Demon Fox Beast appeared in the red team's summoning area, Dake decisively ordered, "Transform into a dragon, Demon Fox Beast." The Demon Fox Beast that was in the smoke suddenly jumped up. When its body jumped 3 meters above the ground, it immediately saw the young blue-eyed dragon that was venting its anger in the center of the arena. Then, it quickly condensed a green leaf on its fingertip. Ultimate skill, Virtual Fox. When it landed again, the people outside the arena immediately saw that the smoke was stirred up crazily, and then it was shaken 3 meters away by the dragon's roar. The second, young blue-eyed dragon, appeared in the smoke that was shaken away. The Demon Fox Beast that transformed into the young blue-eyed dragon perfectly replicated the race, attributes and attack and defense of the young blue-eyed dragon. But its magic power and ultimate skills remained the same. The change in attributes would cause the power of some of the ultimate skills to weaken. However, the increase in attack and defense values would cause the power of some of the ultimate skills to increase. For the Demon Fox Beast, the power of the Fox Leaf Wedge would decrease, and the power of the 8 Vine Fists and Fox Flash Strike would increase. The latter two were more towards the fighting type, and would be more affected by the attack power. The Demon Fox Beast that maintained absolute rationality immediately took off after its successful evolution, stopping in the air to observe the situation. Then it saw that in the red team's summoning area, a giant snake that was as thick as a bucket appeared from the summoning array. Snake Harriman used the sacrificial summoning technique. As for where did his sacrificial offering come from? First was the 6-star Hidden Snake. Next was a 1-star Mist Snake. The Misty Snake Cage could create a 1-star Mist Snake every 15 seconds until the magic power stored inside it was exhausted. Snake Harriman's Misty Snake Cage had a storage limit of 3,000 magic power, and every time a 1-star Mist Snake was created, it would consume 300 magic power, and every time it supported a special summoning, it would consume magic power, star level X100. The Mist Snake had a sure kill skill Tooth of Mist, which could ignore physical defense and cause damage to the opponent, but the damage was not high. In addition to the first Mist Snake that was torn apart by the young blue-eyed dragon, the Misty Snake Cage also created a Mist Snake in the 20th second of the first round. A 1-star Mist Snake and a 6-star Hidden Snake, the sacrificial offering for the 7-star Magic Guide Sprite. The Ash Python was gathered. This Ash Python with a waist as thick as a bucket and a body length of nearly 10 meters, although it was only 1 star higher than the Hidden Snake, the strength of the 2 Magic Guide Sprites was vastly different. Card name, Ash Python type, Sprite card, level, for all, race, reptile, attribute, normal/ground, magic power, 2,800 attack, 3,500 defense, 2,900 sure kill skills, Ash Curse 5 directional dust armor, Cloud Puff armor. When this gray-white Ash Python was summoned, Snake Harriman immediately gave the order. That Ash Python, which was already huge, raised its head and hissed again. Countless amounts of ground energy gathered on the surface of its body, and then piled up into layers of armor, causing its body to increase in size again. And its defense was also greatly increased under the enhancement of the 5 directional dust armor. Roar! The young blue-eyed dragon, which had discovered the Ash Python, rushed up almost immediately. Under the effect of the dragon's reverse scale, Its dragon claws, which had obtained a 50% to 100% attack bonus, actually tore apart the dust armor on the ash python's body. Snake Harriman could not help but reveal a shocked expression. This young blue-eyed dragon's attack bonus after going berserk really gave him a shock. He originally thought that the ash python, which had put on the 5-directional dust armor, would not be afraid of the young blue-eyed dragon's attack at all. In that case, he only needed to ignore it and directly attack Dake's magic ball. The essence of a magic duel was tower defense. Shattering the magic ball's life enchantment would allow one to obtain victory. As a professional duelist, he would not be obsessed with defeating his opponent's magic elf. But the premise of all this was that the young blue-eyed dragon was unable to cause any harm to the ash python. Seeing that the young blue-eyed dragon's claws had landed, the ash python's magic power was left with just over 1,000 points. Snake Harriman hurriedly shouted, "Smoke puff!" In the next second, that ash python endured the pain and lowered its head, then sucked with force. The smoke that covered the entire arena was actually completely sucked in by it in one breath. And at this moment, the audience finally exhaled. As the smoke was completely sucked in, the arena was once again exposed. The blue magic ball and the misty snake cage were being protected by the wall condensed by the fog. A newly born misty snake crawled out from the misty snake cage. Smoke was still coming out from the 2 mouths of the misty snake cage, but it was obviously very thin. And in the blue summoning area, Kettle had shrunk into a ball. It was only at this moment that it quietly poked its head out and looked around. In the sky, the demon fox beast that had transformed into the young blue-eyed dragon pounced in front of the ash python with a fox flash. But after trying to attack without any results, it retreated. Without the support of the dragon's reverse scale, the demon fox beast was indeed unable to break through the ash python's defense. While the ash python was swallowing the smoke, it waved its snake tail and sent the young blue-eyed dragon flying. Then it immediately opened its mouth and spat out clouds. After the smoke was absorbed and spat out, it was stained with even more special properties. It was actually able to float in the air and condense without dissipating. And the ash python's magic power was actually completely replenished in this inhalation and exhalation. With a flick of its tail, it leaped and inconceivably jumped into the clouds, swimming towards the red magic conducting ball like a swimming dragon. A distance of 100 meters, for the ash python, that was more than 10 meters long, was just a distance that could be covered in a single movement. It had even just crossed the midline when it opened its mouth and unleashed its ultimate skill at the magic conducting ball. Ash curse! Phew! Thin dust was spat out from its mouth. It clearly did not touch the magic conducting ball. But on the red magic conducting ball's life enchantment, a curse word formed by ashes actually appeared. Only then did Snake Harriman regain his composure. Then he raised 3 fingers at Dake and said with a chuckle, 30 seconds, you still have 30 seconds. Although Dake had never seen this ash curse before, he immediately understood what it meant. After 30 seconds, the ash curse that was planted on the life enchantment would explode. And after 30 seconds of accumulation, this ash curse would probably have the power to instantly shatter the life enchantment. What Snake Harriman was talking about was the 30-second countdown to death. And at this very moment, there were exactly 10 seconds left on the countdown to battle stage 2. In other words, the outcome of this duel would be decided at battle stage 3. Tens. Under the analysis of the commentator, Jessica Gardner, the entire audience was instantly in an uproar. This mere 30-second countdown to death had instantly aroused the tension in the audience. Whether it was those who supported Dake Dimung or those who supported Snake Harriman, they could not help but silently count in their hearts at this moment. And as the first batch of people shouted, more than half of the audience were actually shouting for the 30-second countdown. The situation in the arena that had originally slowed down due to the spread of smoke. In an instant, it became anxious. Dake's gaze suddenly turned cold. A murderous aura inadvertently burst out. But after activating the underworld magic, he entered an extremely calm state within 2 seconds. The current situation could no longer be described as unfavorable to him. Originally, with 2, young blue-eyed dragon, and kettle present, he could easily hold on until the next round. As the number of cards left in the deck decreased, the probability of him drawing the necessary magic card would also increase. Even if he did not draw it, with Bliss 3 and Fairy Puppet, it would not be difficult to hold on for another 1 or 2 rounds. As long as he could drag on the next round, his chances of winning would be higher. But Snake Harriman's Ashen Curse had cut off this possibility. He only had 1 chance left to draw a card. And the cards in his hand at this moment were Fairy Puppet, Trash Slime, Bliss 3 Moon God Stone, Demon Fox Beast. Dake suddenly roared. The Demon Fox Beast obviously also realized the severity of the situation at the moment. A transparent airflow wrapped around its body, and the 8 vine fists had already entered the charging stage. Shatter the fog wall. Exactly as Dake had expected, the Demon Fox Beast flapped its dragon wings fiercely, and after crossing a distance of tens of meters, it blasted a total of 8 punches towards the city wall in the fog in an instant. Almost within half a second, the city wall in the fog was instantly destroyed. The fog snakes that came out of the fog snake cage bit its toes fiercely, and were all trampled to death by its feet. Then, leaves that were condensed from demonic arts wrapped around its body, and without even looking at the snake cage, it went straight for the magic conducting ball. At this moment, there were 2 ways to get rid of the death predicament. One was to shatter the blue magic conducting ball's life enchantment within 30 seconds. The other was to kill the Ashen Python within 30 seconds. Usually, killing the caster would be able to dispel the curse. But there were exceptions. Therefore, the second method could only be a substitute for when the first method could not be done. However, Snake Harriman had obviously anticipated his actions. At that moment, he pointed his finger and laughed maniacally as he pulled the blue magic conducting ball into the air. The Ashen Python curled its body and actually rolled up the magic conducting ball to protect it. Then, it stared vigilantly at the green-eyed baby dragon that was in a confused state and was ready to send it flying at any time. Tick. Under such circumstances, the 30-second countdown for the second round ended. The 30-second countdown for the third round began. There were only 20 seconds left before the explosion of the Ashen Curse. 69 of 139 Update Late Update. Chapter 646. Battle Stage 3. 30s. This was not the first time Snake Harriman's Ash Python had stepped onto the stage of a duel, but in the previous duels he had been holding back. If not for the fact that his opponent today was Dake Dimming, he would not have gone all out. Not to mention the resentment he had left behind at the masquerade ball. As a fourth-year student who stood at the top of the grade, Snake Harriman did not want to be like Elsie Kevin, becoming a rising star on the stage of a formal duel. Especially when he and Dake were 2 years apart. If he lost this duel, he already had a premonition that he would be mocked by his classmates and friends for a whole year. That was not a good sign. In fact, after Elsie Kevin's defeat, many of the upperclassmen already felt a sense of crisis. 1 second to remember https://m. VIP can't you? VIP Dake Dimming was like a lion cub that had entered a flock of sheep, waving its claws and fangs without restraint. Therefore, even if he had to use this hidden trump card, he had to ensure this victory. Although the Ash Python was only a 7-star magic guide sprite, its sure kill skill, Ash Curse, was unusually suitable for a magic guide duel. First of all, its casting distance was 50 meters, and it only needed to cross half the field to hit the opponent's magic guide ball. Secondly, it did not have a casting track, it was invisible and could not be avoided. Finally, it had double damage. For the magic guide ball's life barrier, which had no defense or resistance, this double damage would not be reduced at all, and would explode instantly after 30 seconds of charging, causing more than 8,000 damage to the magic guide ball's life barrier. Not more, not less, it was just enough to completely shatter the life barrier. If this double damage were to attack the magic guide sprite, it would be offset twice by its defense or attack, and the final damage caused was actually quite ordinary. But if it were to attack the magic guide ball's life barrier, it would be very exaggerated. Moreover, the 30-second delay in the explosion also gave it more flaws. A proper magic guide would have a method to dispel curses on him. As long as it was dispelled within 30 seconds, he would not receive any damage. If he did not have a method to dispel the curse, he could also use magic to disrupt it and cause it to explode in advance, so that the damage received would be minimal. But in a magic duel, he perfectly avoided these two methods. It could not be compared to the zombie Tyrannosaurus Type 0 cruise missile and annihilation hunting bird. It was a sure kill skill that was only suitable for magic duels. 20 seconds left. Snake Harriman did not stop as arrogantly as he appeared to be. He quickly drew 2 cards from the top of the deck and prepared to raise the stakes. He had to crush Dake Dimung within these 20 seconds. And on the red team's platform, Dake Dimung, who was in a desperate situation, quickly reached for the top of the deck. Fairy Puppet could only be used on him, and the magic fairy he had refined, Cyanide Baby Dragon, had already lost control after using Dragon's Reverse Scale. Demon Fox could evolve into a 9-tailed fox with Bliss 3, but what about after that? Would he be able to kill the Ash Python, a 7-star magic guide fairy whose defense had been strengthened to nearly 4,000 points, within 10 seconds by relying on the 6-star 9-tailed fox? Then, under Snake Harriman's obstruction, would he be able to shatter the blue magic ball's life barrier? Of course not. No matter how powerful the heavenly dog of the 9-tailed fox was, it would completely lose its combat ability after using it. It would be impossible for it to chase after the magic ball. The remaining 20 seconds were too short. Therefore, at this moment, Dake Dimung was undoubtedly in a desperate situation that he could not resolve with his cards. He could only pin his hopes on the 2 magic cards in the 3rd round. Draw cards. With the 2 new magic cards in hand, Dake suddenly frowned. The greatest charm of a magic duel was that everything was possible until one's health points reach 0. Find a way out from a desperate situation. Grab the light from the darkness, and never give up until the end. Dream Demon, Wishful Dice. There was no Moon God, no Single Scabbard, and even no Pride. Before Dake drew the cards, he had already predicted many possibilities. If he drew Moon God, he would make the Demon Fox directly armed evolution into Moon God. He would use a strong attack strategy to seize the blue magic ball, and use 12 lunar eclipses to completely shatter its life barrier. If there was an accident, he could use the Moon God Stone to further armed evolution into Night Tiger God. And if he drew Single Scabbard, he could only let the Demon Fox restrain the Ash Python, and then let the Single Scabbard transform into its elf form to fight alone. The Single Scabbard could spontaneously activate Sword Dance and Triple Slash. As long as all 3 slashes hit, it would be enough to completely shatter the magic ball's life barrier. But if he drew Pride, then he could only try another extreme tactic. Let the Demon Fox beat the Green-Eyed Baby Dragon awake, and then Dragon Egg transformation to hatch a Green-Eyed White Dragon. With the Green-Eyed White Dragon's green-eyed avatar, there was still a chance to tear apart the Ash Python's defense in the last few seconds and shatter the blue magic ball. These 3 predictions were the most direct and violent means. But he did not draw it. The last 2 magic cards in this hand, at first glance, even made people feel despair. 3-star magic elf card, Dream Demon, Miracle card, Wishful Dice. The moment Dake saw Wishful Dice, he almost regretted putting this magic card into the deck. Just a little more. In the name of Dake Dimung magic summoning, Dream Demon. There was almost no hesitation. He suddenly pulled out the Dream Demon magic card and placed it horizontally in front of him to summon loudly. The situation was extremely tense. The commentator and the audience held their breaths and stared. Snake Harriman seemed to want to completely suppress Dake Dimung, and he chanted in an even louder voice, "In the name of Snake Harriman, magic summoning, magic reflection cloak." In an instant, the ink-black cloak flew out from the surface of the magic card, and as if it had a consciousness, it flew towards the blue magic ball that was protected by the Ash Python. Like the snake cage in the fog and the hidden snake, this magic reflection cloak was also Snake Harriman's signature magic card. In the entire Shungmalian Academy, the number of students who could craft magic reflection cloak was extremely small. The magic reflection cloak, which could reflect long-range radiation-type magic attacks back, had a high practical value, without a doubt. Those audience members who had some understanding of this, after seeing that Snake Harriman actually drew the magic reflection cloak at this critical moment and used it to protect the blue magic ball, all felt that Dake Diming's momentum was gone, and there was no way to reverse the situation. They even had thoughts such as the gap between the 4th grade and the 2nd grade is really too big. A duel across 2 grades is really too big. And Dake Diming is finally at its peak. Angus Jeffrey, who was sitting in the ring-shaped audience, could not help but sneer. He only felt that today was really a good day. Prince Charles, on the other hand, had a deep gaze, thinking about how Dake would respond. Arvette, on the other hand, was nervously squeezing Galileo, who was on her knees, until he screamed. Time passed bit by bit. 20 seconds was so short that it made one's hair stand on end. In order to shorten the time, Dake directly summoned the Dream Demon, right in front of the contestant platform. The Dream Demon, that appeared from the summoning light, immediately felt the seriousness of the situation on the field. Look at the magic ball on the opposite side. After Dake whispered this, he immediately took advantage of the 3-second cooldown to shout loudly, "Fox Demon, return to defense immediately." The Fox Demon could not help but pause. It obviously could not understand the meaning of returning to defense at this moment. However, when Dake began to cast the next normal summoning spell, it still decisively obeyed the order, and quickly returned to defense. For this reason, it did not even crush the misty snake cage beside its feet. When Snake Harriman saw that the Fox Demon that had transformed into a young green-eyed dragon had pulled away from the misty snake cage, he decisively picked out a magic elf card and quickly summoned. In the name of Snake Harriman, magic summoning, Assassin Snake. 5-star magic elf, Assassin Snake. A stealthy assassin that would disappear without a trace after its speed increased to a certain extent. It had mastered the Surekill skill, high-speed assassination. The faster the speed, the stronger the attack. In the name of Dake Diming, magic summoning, Bliss 3. The bliss light that shot out from an extremely close distance surrounded the Dream Demon's entire body in an instant. Both parties' normal summoning spells were synchronized. After the 2 summons ended, the 3rd round of the battle phase was only left with 20 seconds. The Ashen Curse, as eruption, was only left with 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, everything would be settled. Within the pink radiance, the Dream Demon suddenly widened its eyes, rapidly absorbing the power of bliss. Its figure rapidly expanded within the radiance. Activate the Nightmare Realm. Demonic Mimi. The Dream Demon decisively replied in the process of evolving into a Dream Demon. It obviously understood Dake's intentions. What it needed to do next was to quickly spread out the Nightmare Realm. The deep purple fog was like a tide as it crazily surged towards the direction of the blue magic sphere. The Nightmare Realm's force field spread out at an even faster speed. In a blink of an eye, it had already spread to half the field. At this moment, the Fox Demon had already charged in. But it suddenly realized that it did not feel that familiar sticky feeling. This time, the Dream Demon actually specially left a path for it within the Nightmare Realm. The Fox Demon did not think much. It flapped its wings and soared into the sky, arriving beside the Dream Demon. Right now, there was only 6 seconds left before the Ashen Curse's eruption time. It suddenly turned its head, noticing that there was actually a blurry shadow rapidly following behind it. Don't divert your attention. Dake saw that the Fox Demon was distracted, and abruptly shouted. The Fox Demon's expression turned cold. The green leaves around its body rolled up like a storm. At this moment, it had already roughly guessed Dake's intentions. Demonic Mimi. After a light shout, the Dream Demon's dread gem on its chest emitted a strong light. There were only 5 seconds left. Shio. The assassin serpent was like a phantom arrow as it shot up from the ground. Although Snake Harriman did not see through Dake Diming's intentions, but Dake's actions were so frequent, it was obvious that he had a plan to counter it. Thus, when he summoned the assassin serpent, he ordered it to pursue and interfere. The ash python further contracted. using its enormous snake body to encircle the blue cube magic sphere. On the other side, although the cyanide whelp was still in a mess, it still attracted the attention of the ash python, causing it to be unable to free itself to attack while protecting the blue cube magic sphere. As the nightmare realm fully spread out, no matter if it was the cyanide whelp or the ash python, it was as though they had sunk into a swamp, unable to move. There were only 3 seconds left, but the situation on the field was still confusing. Final 5 seconds. Snake Harriman lowered his hand. His expression no longer had a trace of wildness, his eyes staring intently at the dream demon and the fox demon. In these 5 seconds, can you still flip the heavens? Suddenly his eyebrows twitched. He saw the assassin serpent suddenly appear in midair. That assassin serpent, with a head as long as a shuttle, its cheeks were incomparably sharp, as though it was suddenly nailed in midair, wriggling upwards at an extremely slow speed. Almost at the same time, another magic guide sprite that was almost forgotten by everyone, instantly transformed into a white light, shooting towards the dream demon, like an arrow of light. No, the dream demon had already completely vanished in an instant. Spatial teleportation? Snake Harriman's gaze fiercely turned towards his own side's magic sphere. His first thought was that the dream demon wanted to use spatial teleportation to sneak attack the magic sphere. But when he turned his gaze over, he was extremely astonished to discover the dream demon had indeed appeared at the location of the blue cube magic sphere. But the blue cube magic sphere had instead disappeared. He looked at the magic reflective hood that was originally blocking the blue cube magic sphere, and now it was floating alone. An extremely ominous premonition arose in his heart. He turned his head back with a speed that almost broke his neck, and indeed saw the blue cube magic sphere appearing at the original location of the dream demon. Position swap? This word suddenly jumped out in Snake Harriman's mind. On the red side's platform, Dake Dimming was currently calmly looking ahead, separated only by a layer of barrier. When the dream demon and the blue cube magic sphere instantly swapped positions, he immediately released his magic power to fix it in place. At such a close distance, it was impossible for Snake Harriman to pose a threat to him in a battle of magic power. As for the demon fox, that was already prepared. The green leaves that twined around its body shot towards the blue cube magic sphere like flying daggers. As for itself, it relied on its cyanide whelp form to bombard the blue cube magic sphere with all its might. SSS. The leaf attacks of the fox leaf wedge weakened the blue cube magic sphere's life barrier. The demon fox's heavy fists were like cannons that bombarded the life barrier. Pung! The blue cube magic sphere was sent flying by this punch. But because it was within the nightmare realm's force field, its speed was extremely slow. The next moment, the arrow of light that shot up explosively from below completely shattered the blue cube magic sphere's life barrier. 80000 The blue cube magic sphere's life was reduced to 0. Beep! The referee, who was staring intently at the life points of the 2 magic spheres, blew the whistle at that moment. After seeing the blue cube magic sphere being swapped over, Dake Dimming knew that victory was set. He casually activated the other magic card in his hand. Wishful, 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 as I wish, quickly manifest. A white die that was engraved with 18 different colored symbols suddenly appeared in front of the demon fox. The demon fox picked up the die, revealing a disgusted expression. But it still tossed it out. The attribute symbols on the 18 sides instantly lit up. White light and black light intertwined. 18 different colors of light spun and shone, as dazzling and colorful as neon lights. Winner, Dake Dimming. The referee excitedly shouted out the winner's name. Pung! The ash curse finally exploded. The red cube magic sphere's life barrier was instantly destroyed under the double damage of the explosion and the curse energy. But at this moment, the sound of the explosion was more like a celebratory firework explosion. The wishful die then exploded into a colorful ball of light. A dazzling radiance shot out from the colorful ball of light. It was like a spotlight at a ball, instantly illuminating the battlefield under the curtain of night. Pa! The demon fox beast snapped her fingers and deactivated. Fox vanishes. She changed from the young green-eyed dragon form back to her original graceful figure. It slowly descended to the ground, and beside it was Kettle, who was shaking its head. Under the illumination of the spotlights, the two magic guiding fairies that had worked together to shatter the blue magic conducting ball's life barrier were like stars in the limelight, attracting the attention of almost all the spectators. What kind of transformation technique is this? Spotlight. After the ultimate skills celebration, Dake realized that he had learned a new ultimate skill for a party. He flicked the magic card in his hand and slowly relaxed. The counterattack after being forced into a desperate situation was actually so satisfying. In his previous duels, he had never used the position exchange ability of the Nightmare Realm, just like how he had never allowed the young green-eyed dragon to use Dragon Egg transformation to instantly recover its full state. An ability that had never been exposed was the hardest to guard against. Snake Harriman was completely unguarded. Before the blue magic conducting ball was exchanged, he did not even think that he could possibly lose. The most he could think of was that the Curse of Ashes had been deactivated. He had never thought that the 30-second death countdown was also his countdown. The spectators outside the arena were obviously unable to contain their excitement because of this 30-second counterattack. The applause and cheers were even more enthusiastic than in the previous duels, causing the atmosphere of the entire arena to continue to soar. But Snake Harriman, who was on the blue side's platform, did not feel good. Although the applause was warm, it belonged to someone else. He placed his hand on the card table, gritted his teeth, and tried his best to stabilize his state of mind. He could lose the duel, but he could not collapse his state of mind. The moment he saw the Dream Demon and his own magic conducting ball exchange positions, he was really about to break apart. In the last few seconds, he even watched his own magic conducting ball being destroyed, without any ability to retaliate. The 7-star Great Ash Python was clearly still in the arena, but he could only watch like a statue. The Assassination Serpent was completely unable to crawl in that strange nightmare realm. More importantly, he suddenly realized that he could not think of a way to counter that position exchange technique. Once the Dream Demon expanded the Nightmare Realm to the entire realm. No, there is still a way. Snake Harriman gradually calmed down. Since the Nightmare Realm was a field technique, he could use a corresponding field technique to clash with it, or cover it up. Even if he did not have a field card, or a magic conducting sprite that could use a field technique, he could still raise the magic conducting ball to a height that the Nightmare Realm could not reach. Although the exact height still needed to be tested, no field technique could cover the entire realm. Apart from that, there was another method that even he could easily achieve. That was to hide the magic conducting ball. A one-on-one position exchange technique was definitely directional, and had to confirm the target before it could be released. As long as the Dream Demon was unable to select the target, then the exchange would not be completed. Thinking of this, Snake Harriman suddenly raised his head. But he did not see the Dake. Instead, his line of sight was blocked by the Ash Python that would turn around. Looking at the Ash Python that was as thick as a water bucket, Snake Harriman suddenly looked towards the Assassination Serpent that was still pinned in the air. He immediately realized that this Nightmare Realm field technique had an even more troublesome aspect. Snake Harriman, who was unable to think of a way to counter it, suddenly slapped his head, and recalled the two magic conducting sprites and the Misty Snake Cage back into his card. Until now, the Dream Demon had finally removed the Nightmare Realm. Then the Dream Demon in the form of a young lady finally became active, and with extreme speed, she dived under the spotlight, becoming the brightest star of the night. Although the Demon Fox Owl and Kettle were the ones that completely shattered the blue magic conducting ball's life boundary, but in reality, everyone could see that the Dream Demon was the greatest contributor to this hopeless situation. This specter-type magic conducting sprite was like a bottomless treasure cave. The treasures inside could never be dug out. Exactly how many more strange abilities does it have? Those who had some understanding of it couldn't help but think. Dake Dimming waited for a moment before keeping the chaotic young cyanide WIREM back into the magic conducting card. Then, under the unsatisfied gazes of the three magic-conducting sprites, he kept them one by one. When the last magic-conducting sprite, Kettle, was kept into the magic-conducting card, the spotlight on the field suddenly extinguished, like an actor on stage finally taking a curtain call. Snake Harriman looked at him from afar, and suddenly opened his mouth to speak. Aya, you actually lost by accident. Should I say that Junior Dake is indeed the son of the Valkyrie? You are indeed so formidable that it makes one's heart tremble. I dare to say, among the fourth-year students, I'm afraid only one person with one hand can be beaten by you. As soon as he finished speaking, the audience in the ring-shaped belt suddenly exploded. The Aristocrats Academy, Knights Academy, Magic Conducting Academy and the Fools Academy, all the fourth-year students could not accept this statement. Which of the little sorcerers who could enter the Shung Malian Academy to further their studies did not have a little bit of arrogance in their hearts? Snake Harriman's seemingly casual words really filled up the hatred in an instant. For a moment, no one even discussed the matter of him losing to a second-year student on the spot. The fourth-year students, especially the outstanding ones among them, all had their gazes fixed on Dake Dimeng, quickly thinking about whether they could gain an advantage if they went up on the field. And the third-year students who were directly ignored were now even more embarrassed. Especially the third-year students, the few who thought that they were not inferior to Elsie Kevin, were even more indignant. They admitted that Dake's duel skills up until now were indeed very high. But the outcome of a magic-conducting duel was not so easily decided. Just like this time, Dake Dimeng had drawn the Dream Demon and completed a comeback. But what if he did not draw the Dream Demon? Would the victor be Snake Harriman? They could not help but think so. Then they secretly accumulated the fire in their hearts, thinking of defeating Dake in the next Golden Cup and proving themselves. But they did not realize that when they started to have such thoughts, it meant that they had already placed Dake Dimeng in a higher position than themselves. Snake Harriman secretly observed the reactions of the third and fourth-year students, and could not help but secretly heave a sigh of relief. As long as he dragged down all the people who could laugh at him, then no one would be able to laugh at him, right? The Golden Cup had a special challenge system. As long as the challenger issued a challenge, the challenged accepted the challenge, and after the Duel Club's review, they could completely decide on the challenger. Of course, the Duel Club's review had always been very strict. Year, grades, past records, estimated strength and so on would all be considered factors. The Duel Club would strictly eliminate the possibility of cheating. With just one sentence, Snake Harriman had successfully created a trend and atmosphere. He gradually smiled. Dake Dimeng obviously sensed the intention behind Snake Harriman's words, but he did not dislike it. Not to mention that he had just enjoyed the deadly pleasure of being forced into a desperate situation. He only had anticipation for a duel of this intensity. Even before this duel, he would not be afraid of the third and fourth year's challenges. On the contrary, if all the third and fourth years were to suppress their energy to challenge him, then he could be like an experienced HR person and freely choose the opponent he liked from a pile of resumes. Of course, the possibility of that was not high. For a senior to challenge a junior, especially a junior with extraordinary strength, the risk they had to bear was not small. Senior Harriman, Dake said with a faint smile, although I really want to go along with you now, the reason why I was able to win this duel was largely due to the element of luck. If possible, I really want to have a best-of-3 duel with you, senior. That way, perhaps I can remove the element of luck as much as possible, and see how big the gap between me and you is. Ha! Snake Harriman narrowed his eyes and laughed dryly. Best of 3? It is indeed very attractive, but unfortunately, the rules of the Golden Cup do not allow it. I hope there will be another chance to meet you on the stage of a duel next time. I won't take up your visiting time. After saying that, Snake Harriman immediately went offline. Dake turned his head slightly and saw that Senior Judy was already beside him. He could not help but take a breath, and was even more impressed by this senior's ability. First of all, congratulations on successfully defeating a fourth-year senior. I really did not expect that even student Snake Harriman was not your match. Do you know how fast my heart was beating when he announced that you only had 30 seconds left? Senior Judy grabbed Dake's hand like a die-hard fan and tried to press it against her chest to let him feel her rapid heartbeat to prove that what she said was true. Hiss. Dake suddenly retracted his hand as if he had been electrocuted and said with a smile, "Senior Judy, this disguise does not suit you." Senior Judy let go of his hand very naturally, and her slightly long and narrow eyes flashed with a seductive light, but she had already said enough. "What do you think of the result of this duel?" Dake said calmly, "I have already answered Senior Harriman before. The reason why I was able to win this duel was largely due to luck. But in fact, the most fundamental reason is not luck." Judy asked curiously, "Then what is it?" Dake raised his head slightly, looked at Snake Harriman who was walking down from the contestant stage, and said slowly, "It is because Senior Harriman deliberately reminded me that I only had 30 seconds left after using the killing curse." Senior Judy looked thoughtful. "If you think about it carefully, it seems to be true?" Dake nodded and smiled. "Yes, Senior Harriman is really a good person." Snake Harriman, who was walking down the stairs, suddenly staggered and almost slipped down the stairs. But after he steadied his footsteps, he suddenly heard faint laughter coming from the audience behind him. Of course, it could not all be good-natured laughter. Snake Harriman's face instantly scrunched up into a bitter gourd, and he quickly lowered his head and quickened his pace to leave the duel arena. Damn it. Dake Dimming, just you wait. The winner's interview continued. Senior Judy did not hide her admiration for Dake for being able to defeat a fourth-year student who was 2 grades above him, and asked if he had changed his goal after this duel, to aim for the top 16, or the top 8. But Dake shook his head to indicate that he had not. Senior Judy paused and suddenly asked, "Then what about the Silver Cup? What are your expectations for the Silver Cup?" Dake raised his head slightly and said with a smile, "Senior, isn't it inappropriate to mention the Silver Cup in the Gold Cup?" "How could it be?" Judy immediately reached out and pointed the microphone at the audience, and asked loudly, "Do you think it's inappropriate?" Of course, the audience who did not mind the drama would definitely not say that it was inappropriate. Dake smiled helplessly and said slowly, "After experiencing today's duel, I increasingly understand that the Silver Cup is not the stage I want." Judy's eyes flashed and she suddenly said, "Junior, I can interpret your words as you want to give up on the competition?" Dake nodded slowly and said, "It's not that I haven't thought about it." In other words, the Silver Cup was no longer worth his time. The second-year students who were watching the duel in the ring suddenly made an uproar that was even more intense than the third-year and fourth-year students. Although most of the second-year students were aware of this before Dake said this, the feeling after being pointed out was very different. Among them, students like Saraswati and Ai Mametis who had been desperately trying to catch up, and students like White Gowda who had extremely high self-esteem, could not help but clench their teeth. Especially White Gowda, his fists were clenched, and his eyes were filled with extreme unwillingness. If it wasn't for Dake, the most eye-catching second-year student would have been. Wait, why do I have this thought? White Gowda suddenly woke up, only to feel sweat on his back, and his clothes were wet. The night wind blew, and a chill came over and a chill grew. White. Luoboat noticed his abnormality and quickly asked. White Gowda raised his hand to touch his forehead, and suddenly felt hot. He hesitated and said, "I might have a fever?" Luoboat said with concern, "Then should we go to the infirmary?" White Gowda pondered for a moment, but shook his head and said, "Maybe it's just a psychological reason. I don't want to miss the final duel between Senior Panduola and Senior Sharp." Luoboat could not help but frown and ask, "Are you sure?" White Gowda nodded. On the red team's platform, Dake Dimming was still calmly answering Senior Judy's question. The Silver Cup was a competition limited to second-year students, so the credits and resources he could obtain were not that important to him. Instead of spending time competing for the Silver Cup, it was better to concentrate on his research project. And with the strength of the Gold Cup, he could use it to verify his research results. Compared to the Silver Cup and the Gold Cup, he cared more about this year's school championship. Last year, he lost the school championship because of the strength of the Magic Academy. This year, he was determined to take it back. When the interview was over, Dake walked down from the platform. That was the end of his schedule for the day. Next, he would wait wholeheartedly for Senior Panduola to go on stage. Panduola Doragon and Noah Sharp were undoubtedly the top duelists in the Shungmalian Academy. They basically represented the highest level that the Academy students of this era could reach. And both of them were users of the Dragon series of cards. However, Panduola Doragon was a dragon type that focused on the light element, while Noah Sharp was a dragon type that focused on the dark element. Dake walked out of the contestants' passage and did not meet Senior Snake Harriman, who had walked out first, which made him feel rather regretful. He originally wanted to chat with his senior for a while more. Therefore, not long after, he directly returned to the spectator seats in the ring and sat down between Deanna and Doran. As soon as he sat down, Doran impatiently asked, "What's the matter, Dake? Are you not going to participate in the Silver Cup's main competition?" Dake blinked and waited for him to calm down before saying, "I've already gone through 10 duels and completed the task assigned by Professor Cheong-si. Of course, I'm free to choose what I want. Moreover, it's only 10 duels. I shouldn't be able to enter the top 8, right? Haven't you done your research?" Doran's face was filled with disbelief. 30 points for winning 10 duels. You've already obtained 30 points. The Silver Cup's competition system is that the winner gets 3 points, and the loser gets 2 points deducted. If you can maintain a winning rate of 50%, you need a total of 60 duels to obtain 30 points. Who can participate in a total of 60 duels? Dake smiled faintly. But not everyone only has a 50% winning rate. Indeed. Doran could not help but feel depressed. You're no longer number 1. Sarah and Aima have already surpassed 30 points, and even White and Deanna are almost there. What do you mean even Deanna? Deanna was immediately dissatisfied. Doran immediately shut up. Dake shook his head and said, "There's still a month left before the competition ends. Even if I can barely enter the top 8, it's meaningless. I'll leave the glory of the aristocrat house to you guys." Doran. "The enemy is too strong. I can't bear this glory." Deanna. "Leave it to me." The two of them finished speaking at the same time, and then glared at each other. Dake could not help but smile. "It's just the Silver Cup. Do your best. Our goal is the school championship, isn't it?" Doran opened his eyes wide and immediately understood. "You're right. The school championship is the main point. I also want to make a wish to the Holy Grail." Dake encouraged him. "You can do it. The school championship is a duel between schools, and everyone is a participant. If you can win the Silver Cup, the credit reward for the champion is also quite considerable, and it will become the foundation of the school championship." But when it came to the Silver Cup, Doran became discouraged again. Obviously, his record in the Silver Cup was not ideal. If he did not make a breakthrough in his studies later, he might even lose the top 8. Dake looked at him and said earnestly, "If you want to get something, you have to fight for it yourself. Relying too much on others will not bring you any substantial gains. I hope to see you in the finals of the school championship. Well, at least the semifinals. Can you not say at least?" Doran immediately said, "I just got excited." Dake laughed, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Do your best." Deanna came over and took the opportunity to hug Dake's arm. She said with narrowed eyes, "Well, I'll do my best." Luosi snickered on the side. Then the competition continued, as the time gradually turned to 9 o'clock. Finally, as the final duel, under the cheers of thousands of spectators, the curtains were drawn. 5th grade Magic Engineering Academy, Panduola Doragon versus 6th grade Knight Academy, Noah Sharp. Duel. 72 of 139. I was delayed by something today. Although I'm sleepy and tired, I finally finished writing. I won't write about the next duel in detail. In addition, I still have things to do during the day tomorrow. If I don't update by noon tomorrow, it means that I have to write through the night again. Storm cry. Anyway, after so many days, I've finally paid off half of the bounty. Brothers, please spend 3 seconds to vote for a monthly vote and a guarantee blade. Give the poor guy some food to eat. Don't let him work on an empty stomach. Woo-woo. Chapter 647. When Panduola Doragon and Noah Sharp slowly walked onto the stage, the cheers of the audience seemed to pierce through the night sky. It was so high that it was shocking. The number of fans that these two had accumulated over a long period of time was certainly not something that a newcomer could compare with. In the audience outside the stage, there were even people who had changed into white and black support uniforms. They all held up small reflective colored sticks and waved them wildly, as if they were watching an idol concert. The members of the Holy Church occasionally saw this scene and couldn't help but frown. But the era promoted the development of duels and the formation of this kind of fan economy. The people needed entertainment, and they also needed sustenance. Let us warmly welcome Silver Dragon Lady and Evernight Baron onto the stage. The voice of the commentator, Jessica Gardner, instantly became impassioned. Regardless of whether she was excited or not, she looked very excited on the surface. Dake stopped talking softly beside him and raised his head slightly to look at the stage. The floating light balls illuminated the night sky. Website: https://m. Vipcanshu. VIP. The two people on the stage were clearly visible under the illumination of the light. A duel at night was always more exciting than during the day. When all kinds of magic and killing moves tore through the night sky, it gave people a sense of transcendence accompanied by the light effects. Panduola had black hair and red eyes. There was a white scale at the bottom of her eye that looked like a mole decorated with tears. Her red eyes were undoubtedly inherited from her mother, Hephaestus Doragon, and her black hair was from her deceased human father. But Dake had occasionally heard her say that once she activated her dragon bloodline, her long black hair would turn into silver hair that was no different from Hephaestus. And there was something similar. Aurora Montefily's mother had red hair and red eyes. She had only inherited part of her mother's eye color, and she had also inherited her father's hair color. But after she activated her sun-chasing giant bloodline, her hair color would turn into a dazzling red like the scorching sun. This kind of hair color change, according to the nature of the power, was actually quite common. But it was indeed very fashionable. Standing on the red team's platform, Panduola Doragon raised his hand to tidy up his hair that had been messed up by the night wind. He glanced at the ring and paused for a moment where his mother and Junior were standing. Then he turned his attention back to the duel. She needed to go all out in this duel. Her opponent was not someone she could deal with easily. Noah Sharp's expression was even more serious. Last night, during the final crusade against Bichimos, he was one step behind and lost the platinum star that was within his reach. Now that he was standing on the duel stage again, he only wanted to win. The two of them had been rivals since 2 years ago. They had dueled no less than 10 times, and each of them had their own victories. He was not the kind of person who would keep track of the number of wins and losses. As a senior, if he couldn't achieve complete victory, it would be considered a failure. Although Evernight Baron had the gentleness and steadiness of a knight, he also had the arrogance of a dragon magus. Both sides quickly blocked out the surrounding noise and focused their attention on the duel. There were duelists who relied on external factors to boost their morale and ultimately increase their combat power to win. But Shangmalian Academy rarely produced such hot-blooded duelists. Perfect systems and meticulous thinking had always been their winning weapons. Beep! The whistle sounded, and the 30-second countdown to the duel entered the preparation stage. When the two contestants instantly drew their cards, Dake was also fully focused. The height of the audience seats in the ring was generally lower than the first row of the audience seats outside the ring, but it was still higher than the duel arena. A special barrier was cast outside the duel arena, allowing the audience to see the projections of the two contestants' cards from every angle. But before the summoning, the cards were shown on the back. Dake now had a lot of experience in watching duels. When the 30-second countdown to the preparation stage began, the best thing to watch was the expressions of the two contestants. It was quite fun to read the satisfaction of the contestants' cards from the slight changes in their expressions and predict the outcome of the duel. But Dake heard that professional duelists were very good at managing their expressions. Professional duelists could even use the changes in their expressions to confuse their opponents, so that they wouldn't dare to use their cards. After all, the main purpose of the Shangmalian Academy's students participating in duels was to hone their magical engineering skills and not purely dueling skills. So, there was less research in this area. Most of them just used no change in their expressions to prevent others from spying on them. But Panduola and Noah Sharp's expressions were very lively. "Looks like senior sister's luck isn't very good," Dake said with narrowed eyes. Doran immediately asked curiously, "Isn't she smiling?" Dake nodded and said matter-of-factly, "Yes, she's smiling because of the increased difficulty of winning." Doran's voice suddenly stopped. "What's so funny about this?" The 30-second countdown passed in the blink of an eye. Both contestants drew the first magic card from their hands at the same time, and immediately summoned it. The magic cards that they summoned at the start were also flipped open in the projection. Dake took a quick look and couldn't help but squint. They were all magic cards that he had never seen before. But the most interesting thing about watching a magic duel was that even if one didn't recognize the magic card, one could guess the function of the magic card by looking at the card's name and the card's image. The various values displayed by the magic elven cards also allowed the audience to quickly understand the basic strength of the cards. Panduola Doragon summoned a magic card called Sword of Four Seals. The image on the card surface was a light barrier formed by 4 light swords floating in the air. It immediately reminded him of Sword of Light Protection in Yu-Gi-Oh! Noah Sharp, on the other hand, summoned a magic elven card called Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven Card. Both contestants' usual summoning spells were compressed to the limit of 3 seconds. Almost 3 seconds later, the 2 magic cards were activated in an instant. Dake's pupils shrank as he suddenly noticed something unusual. Whether it was Panduola Doragon or Noah Sharp, there were almost no light effects after they completed their summoning. Panduola's Sword of Four Seals appeared directly above the red side's summoning area. With the red side's summoning area as the foundation, it formed a square barrier that was 10 times 10. As for Noah Sharp's Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card, there were very few summoning lights. Only a summoning circle with a diameter of 1 meter appeared in the blue side's summoning area. The human magic elven wearing a pitch-black magic robe appeared directly. During this time, one couldn't even see the process of materialization. Not only did they compress the usual summoning spell to the limit of 3 seconds, but they also suppressed the process between the successful summoning and the materialization. Such a small difference in time might not have much of an impact in a low-level duel, but in a high-level duel, it could change the situation. Dake couldn't help but gasp. How did they do it? With his current level, this was a profound technique that he still couldn't touch. However, the situation on the field was more or less clear through the starting summoning choices of both contestants. Panduola probably didn't draw the card he wanted, so he chose to be on the defensive at the beginning of the first round. Noah Sharp, on the other hand, chose to attack forcefully. Dragon's Breath Magic Spear. Noah Sharp's voice resounded in the field at that moment. The Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card suddenly raised his magic wand, and a pitch-black magic spear that looked like it was condensed from a dragon's breath appeared in the air, split into 2. Then, the pitch-black magic spear split into 2 and shot out explosively. In the blink of an eye, the dragon's breath magic spear, which had split into 2, shot through 2 of the light swords of the Sword of Four Seals. These light swords had a fixed magic value and defense value, and they were all 1000. Only by destroying all 4 light swords could the Sword of Four Seals' defensive barrier be broken. The defensive barrier itself had a defense value of 4000, and its magic value was the sum of the 4 light swords. Every time a light sword was destroyed, the barrier's magic value would decrease by 1000. For those who didn't understand the mechanism of the Sword of Four Seals, they could only sigh helplessly in the face of a barrier with a defense value of 4000. However, Noah Sharp obviously didn't belong to that category. The Dragon's Breath Magic Spear, of the Dark Knight Dragon Magic Spear, only had a cooldown of 6 seconds, and it could split into 2 or 4 swords when attacking. When it was split into 2, its power wouldn't change, but when it was split into 4, its power would be halved. The basic power of the Dragon's Breath Magic Spear was equivalent to the Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card's attack power, which was 2000 points. And it was only a 3-star magic elf. After shooting out the Dragon's Breath Magic Spear, The Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card spontaneously summoned a translucent dark barrier to protect itself and the blue magic sphere. This black dragon barrier could double its defense value from 1000 to 2000, and its magic value was connected to itself. In addition to these two sure kill skills, the Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card also had a sure kill skill called Dark Knight Dragon Summon, which could directly summon the Dark Knight Dragon. Attack, Defense, Summon. Within 3 seconds, the Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card activated all 3 sure kill skills in one go. A 3-star Dark Dragon species, the Dark Knight Dragon, was specially summoned from the deck. Compared to the Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card, the Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card was undoubtedly much more ordinary. Although it also had the strength of a 3-star dragon, the only sure kill skill it had was Dark Knight Doppelganger, which was to create a doppelganger that didn't have a sure kill skill and could be sacrificed. Although he couldn't directly summon a 9-star magic elf because there was no second-tier magic elf present, he could still summon a 6-star magic elf. Moreover, he didn't need to sacrifice the high-strength Dark Knight Dragon Magic Elven card. He didn't even need to use any cards in his hand. Therefore, in the 7th second of the battle, Noah Sharp had already started to summon a 6-star magic elf. On the contrary, Panduola's luck wasn't ideal. After she activated the Sword of Four Seals, she only summoned a 3-star magic elf, the Dragon of Compassion. However, after Noah Sharp saw her summon the Dragon of Compassion, he couldn't help but change his expression slightly. The Dragon of Compassion was a pure light attribute dragon species. The face of the card was that of an old and decrepit white dragon. After reaching the limit of its lifespan, it almost lost the ability to move. However, as a dragon, its body still gave it a high magic power and defense. Card name: Dragon of Compassion. Type: Elf card. Level: *****. Race: Dragon species. Attribute: Light. Magic power: 2000. Attack: 0. Defense: 2000. Sure kill skills: Heart of Compassion, Sleepless White Dragon. Although it was only a purple card with 2 sure kill skills. However, the 2 sure kill skills of the Dragon of Compassion were very special. Among them, Heart of Compassion was an aura skill with the dragon as the center. As long as the dragon was within the aura of Heart of Compassion, the light element would automatically gather, and the light attribute magic elves or light attribute magic objects within the range would recover their magic power once every 30 seconds. Although every time Heart of Compassion was triggered, it would consume the same amount of magic power of the Dragon of Compassion. However, Heart of Compassion's magic power recovery was an area of effect. The other sure kill skill, Sleepless White Dragon, had a life-prolonging effect similar to Hall of Light. As long as the Merciful Dragon existed, all the other white dragons within the range of the Merciful Heart would turn into spirits after they died. The duration was only 1/6 of Light of Morning Hall, but it was still 30 seconds. Of course, these were not the key points. The key point was that it was also a white dragon. The white dragon deck that Panduola usually used was very simple. If there was a white dragon, there would be a second white dragon. If there was a second white dragon, there would be a third white dragon. If they couldn't stop it in time, there would be countless white dragons pouncing on their faces. However, with Sleepless White Dragon, it was impossible to kill all these white dragons. Therefore, how to kill the Dragon of Compassion was the key to victory. Noah Sharp looked at his summoning area. After offering Dark Knight Dragon and Dark Knight Dragon Clone as sacrifices, he successfully sacrificed a 6-star Magic Guide Spirit in his hand. It was a Dragon type plus Dark type, Latent Shadow Dragon. The whole sacrificial summoning process only took 3 seconds, and it directly skipped the process of drawing the sacrificial summoning array. Following the disappearance of the 2 sacrificial items, a sacrificial summoning array appeared in the air above the blue summoning area. The Latent Shadow Dragon flew out of the summoning array and quickly drilled into the shadow of the blue Magic Guide Ball. Then, with this shadow as the starting point, the pitch-black dragon shadow immediately radiated toward the opposite side. In the blink of an eye, it covered more than half of the field. A terrifying aura spread with the invasion of the shadow. At this time, the Dark Knight Dragon had condensed another 2 magic dragon breath spears. If he wanted to kill the Dragon of Compassion, he had to first break the barrier of the Sword of Four Seals. After these two magic dragon breath spears were shot, the Dark Knight Dragon consumed another 200 points of magic power. In addition to the 200 points of magic power consumed during the first shot, the 200 points of magic power consumed to set up the Black Dragon barrier, and the 200 points of magic power consumed to summon the Dark Knight Dragon. Its original 1,600 points of magic power was now only left with 800 points. However, as the magic dragon breath spears crossed space and instantly shattered the remaining two light swords of the Sword of Four Seals, the barrier of light did not disappear. Accompanied by the Dragon of Compassion's sorrowful roar, a total of 4 light swords instantly condensed in the 4 corners of the barrier of light, supporting the crumbling barrier, and the Dragon of Compassion only lost 1,000 points of magic power. This was the combination of the Dragon of Compassion and the Sword of Four Seals. The cheers of the audience outside the field instantly soared. But Noah Sharp had long expected this result. He very calmly pulled out the third magic card and quickly summoned it. It was still the limit of 3 seconds, and he successfully summoned this magic card. After an instant, a pitch-black light beam shot out from the center of the black shadow formed by the hidden shadow dragon. It rose to the sky and suddenly exploded. The pitch-black light balls were like a meteor shower, and they rapidly fell toward the barrier of the Sword of Four Seals. Magic card, Dark Stars. It was a large-scale offensive spell that could only be launched when there was a second tier, or even a second-tier dark magic fairy in the field. With the sign of the falling stars, the 4 light swords that the Sword of Four Seals condensed again were all shattered by the pitch-black light balls. As for the barrier of light with 4,000 points of defense, it was finally broken. Hidden Shadow Dragon, waiting for an opportunity to move. However, on its path of stealth, a jade-like foot in a white boot suddenly stomped down and accurately stepped on its head. The light energy released from the foot firmly pinned the shadow of the hidden shadow dragon's head. The pure white dragon, who was specially summoned by the Dragon of Compassion, looked at the hidden shadow dragon under her foot with a cold expression. She raised her hand and slowly pulled out the cherry-red spear on her back. The tip of the spear was burning with boiling blood flames. Ultimate skill, Dragon Spear World. Panduola Doragon's voice slowly sounded. The pure white dragon stabbed the dragon spear in her hand into the shadow on the ground. The blood flames with strong light energy started from the tip of the spear, and instantly ignited the pitch-black shadow that almost covered the entire field. In the blink of an eye, the entire field was burning with blood flames. The hidden shadow dragon's angry roar suddenly came from the shadow. Whether it was the hidden shadow dragon's shadow invasion, or the dragon spear, world of the white dragon, they were both ultimate skills with some field effects. When used normally, they could disperse or cover the rest of the field effects. Seeing this, Noah Sharp hurriedly ordered, Hidden Shadow Dragon, Shadow Curse Bind. With the hidden shadow dragon's anger, the shadow under the pure white dragon's feet boiled violently. Like ink, it climbed up its feet and dyed the pure white into pitch black. At this moment, the first round of this duel was about to end. Good morning. Why, see, are you happy on Singles Day? Happy monthly ticket on Happy Blade. Chapter 648. In the first round, both contestants did not display any outstanding battle tactics, but their summoning techniques and the strength of their magic cards left others in the dust. This was especially true for Pandora Doragon's Dragon of Compassion and Noah Sharp's Dark Knight Dragon Magic Guide. These 2 3-star Magic Guide fairies had basic attributes comparable to 4-star Magic Guides and extremely rare and practical sure-kill skills. If their stars were concealed, no one would think that they were merely 3-star. Dake thought quickly as he watched the duel. Under normal circumstances, it was extremely difficult for a sorcerer to refine a 3-star Magic Guide fairy of such strength, but it seemed that the Magic Guide fairies of high-level duelists were generally of such strength. Is this the result of the second refinement? He could not help but ponder. Deconstructing an existing magic card, then adding new materials to refine it without damaging it was commonly known as the second refinement. Sorcerers used this method to make up for the flaws of the magic guide card, or to further enhance it. However, the application of the second refinement was very high-end. One must have extraordinary professional knowledge of the target magic guide fairy in order to have a chance of success. Once the refinement failed, the magic guide fairy card would be completely destroyed. The risk was so great that a normal sorcerer could not bear it. Remember, https://m VIP can't you? VIP considering that the re-refinement of high-star magic guide fairies required more scarce resources and had higher difficulty, sorcerers would generally limit the second refinement to the first tier, and it was the type that had the directional refinement formula. Of course, there were also sorcerers who were very good at taking risks. They had a deep understanding of bankrupt and rooftop diving, and would do some very irrational things. Of course, Dake would not do that. However, the supermodels of the Dragon of Compassion and Dark Knight Dragon Magic Guide had further strengthened his determination to research the second refinement. However, he was not prepared to refine the existing Magic Guide Fairy card a second time. That was a risk he could not bear. Refine a new Magic Guide Fairy card using materials other than the Fruit of Great Sin, and then conduct research on it. That was the initial strategy he had formulated. Magic Guide Fairies refined in that way would not have initial intelligence. Unless he had a special method to extract and preserve the intelligence of a magic elf, he would never risk a magic elf that had already gained intelligence. The materials obtained from the dungeon adventure and the masquerade ball can be used. While Dake was deep in thought, the duel between Panduola Doragon and Noah Sharp had reached its climax. He gradually emptied his mind and focused on watching the duel. From the start of the first round, both sides' attacks and defenses were extremely tense, so dense that it made it hard for one to breathe. Powerful magic, exquisite tools, and a secret ritual that was impossible to guard against. With the help of so many kinds of magic cards, the intensity of the battle rose sharply. The pure white dragon maiden was successfully bound by the latent shadow dragon's shadow curse bind. However, even though the pure white dragon maiden couldn't move, she still killed the latent shadow dragon with the dragon spear in her hand. At the beginning of the second round, Noah Sharp activated the secret ritual card called Black Dragon Sacrifice, and relied on the death of the two black dragons in the field, the Dark Knight Dragon and the latent shadow dragon, to complete a special ritual summoning. These two magic guide fairies with a total of 9 stars used this alternative sacrificial method to awaken the dark dragon named Nether, the Netherworld Lantern Dragon. That was the absolute trump card in Noah Sharp's hand other than the Redridge Black Dragon. It was easier to summon than the Redridge Black Dragon. Although its initial strength was slightly inferior, it had a killer skill, the Netherworld Lantern, which gave it a natural advantage in the field. Since the Netherworld Lantern Dragon was summoned, every dark dragon that died around it would become fuel for the Netherworld Lantern, turning the Netherworld Lantern from a dead object into a living creature. The Netherworld Lantern that became a living creature would inherit the star level of the dead black dragon. Its 3 attributes would increase according to the star level. The only killer skill, the Netherworld Fire, would also increase in power accordingly. There were a total of 9 Netherworld Lanterns. Every time a Netherworld Lantern was lit up, it would give the Netherworld Lantern Dragon a total of star level x 100 points. The star level x 100 points attribute would be allocated to magic power, attack, or defense according to the 3 attributes of the dead black dragon that lit up the Netherworld Lantern. Once all 9 Netherworld Lanterns were lit up, the Netherworld Lantern Dragon's strength would increase to an extremely unbelievable level. Under normal circumstances, when Noah Sharp summoned the Netherworld Lantern Dragon, the outcome of the duel was already decided. However, he was facing the white dragon user, Panduola Doragon. With the Dragon of Compassion still present, Panduola activated the new magic card, the White Dragon's Marriage, in the second round, and summoned a white dragon of the same star level from the deck. It was a 3-star attribute dragon called the White Feather Light Dragon. The White Feather Light Dragon had snow-white wings and a halo above its head like an angel. After being specially summoned, it and the Dragon of Compassion received the buff of the White Dragon's Bride and White Dragon's Groom respectively. In a situation where two dragons of the opposite sex existed at the same time, the white dragon's bride and white dragon's groom would entrust everything to each other. The specific effect was that both sides became a special unified entity. Their star level, magic power, attack, and defense would all be stacked. This caused the two 3-star light attribute white dragons to leap into 6-star magic guiding fairies. Although their killer skills were still the same, the increase in attributes brought about by the change in attributes was already very terrifying. The white dragon's marriage was still not mature at the moment. It was most effective on the 3-star magic elves of the first tier. It could create two 6-star magic elves out of thin air. Although this 6-star magic guide fairy was just an empty shell, it could be used as a sacrificial summon. And if she could go one step further and refine the white dragon's marriage that was effective on the 2nd-tier magic elves, at that time, she only needed two 6-star light attribute dragons to create a 12-star magic elven out of thin air, even if it was just an empty 12-star shell. But if two 12-star empty shells appeared at the same time, moreover, if Panduola could one day refine a true 12-star magic elven, she could use the empty 12-star shell as a sacrifice to summon a true 12-star magic elven. Unfortunately, the difficulty of refining the white dragon's marriage was already very high. Going one step further was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. After Panduola specially summoned the white feather light dragon, she immediately ordered it to release a sure kill skill that should have belonged to the light attribute angel species, the Angel of Light's Prayer. A pure light attribute magic elven that was the same as its current star level, 6-star, was specially summoned from the deck. That was a true 6-star white dragon, the Heavenly Moat White Dragon. The Heavenly Moat White Dragon had the power to cross levels hidden in its body. It was a genius among the white dragons, a white dragon with extraordinary talent. When the Heavenly Moat White Dragon was treated as a sacrifice, it could summon a 3rd-tier magic elven without any other sacrifices. There were no additional requirements for the race and attributes of the magic elven. Even if the Heavenly Moat White Dragon was not in the white dragon deck, it was still a very useful meat chicken. After Panduola used its remaining heat, she offered it as a sacrifice and summoned her trump card on the spot, the 9-star attribute dragon species, the Heavenly White Dragon. The way both sides set up the stage was dazzling. When the 9-star 9 Netherworld Lantern Dragon and the Heavenly White Dragon were pulled onto the stage in the second round, the entire venue was in an uproar. However, the appearance of the two 9-star magic elves was only the beginning. Immediately after, both sides used the two 9-star magic elves as the core and continuously laid out magic cards, item cards, venue cards, and secret ritual cards, surrounding them and attacking and defending quickly. The intensity of the battle began to increase in a straight line. Apart from these two 9-star dragon species, other magic elves continuously appeared and left the stage, and the battle became more and more intense. The audience outside the stage held their breaths and stared at the duel stage, afraid of missing out on any details. Even the cheers and shouts had weakened a lot. When the battle reached the 9th round, the 9 Netherworld Lantern Dragon's 3 attributes had been strengthened to an unbelievable degree. Purely in terms of the strength of its 3 attributes, it had already surpassed the Heavenly White Dragon, which had a passive sure kill skill. The Heavenly Dragon. The Heavenly Dragon had a passive effect that was almost the same as the Divine Personality armament. Not only did it increase the Heavenly White Dragon's hypostasis by 1, but it also made it immune to most of the transformation-type sure kill skills that targeted it. It even increased its magic power by 1,000, attack by 1,000, and defense by 1,000. It gave off the impression that two Bichimos were fighting each other on the field. The duel stage, which was only 120 meters long and 80 meters wide, was not enough for them to display their skills. They had already flown high into the sky and were fighting fiercely. However, in this intense atmosphere that made it hard for people to breathe, both contestants maintained a certain degree of calmness. They kept drawing cards, summoning, deploying, and occasionally launching surprise attacks on the opponent's magic elves. However, almost every attack was promptly resolved by their long-distance control of their magic elves. While releasing magic to control the ball, they also used magic to summon magic cards. This high-end technique of doing two things at once was as simple as drinking water and eating to them. Under such circumstances, the tactical effect of the surprise attack of the magic ball was minimized, but it could still distract the opponent. In such a high-intensity battle, the mental exhaustion of a magus was very shocking. When this little bit of mental exhaustion accumulated into a heavy enough burden, the magus would show flaws. The duel reached the 13th round. Outside of the 9 Netherworld Lantern Dragon, Noah Sharp finally summoned his natal dragon, a 9-star Dark Attribute dragon species, the Redback Black Dragon. The appearance of the Redback Black Dragon made Noah Sharp's supporters finally couldn't help but let out a fanatical cheer. The cheers were so loud that it seemed like they were going to overturn the entire stadium, making people's blood boil. Under the joint attack of the 9 Netherworld Lantern Dragon and the Redback Black Dragon, Panduola's Sky White Dragon finally fell into a disadvantageous position. The red magic ball's life barrier was also attacked in this short period of time. However, Panduola Doragon was still calm. She even showed a cold smile that was hard to decipher. After that, she raised the magic card in her hand high, and with the effect of another magic card, she summoned the second 9-star magic elf. It was the second Sky White Dragon. When the second Sky White Dragon appeared, the entire stadium was in an uproar. The sudden uproar of the audience's cheers even drowned out the voices of Noah Sharp's supporters. On the blue team's platform, Noah Sharp could not help but widen his eyes, an extremely shocked expression on his face. No one expected the Silver Dragon Lady to summon a second Sky White Dragon, except for her mother, Hephaestus, and Dake Dimming, who was watching the duel from the ring. As expected, Dake showed a look of understanding and wasn't too surprised. As early as when senior sister Pandora summoned the first Sky White Dragon in the second round, he had already seen through it. This was because the Sky White Dragon didn't have the intelligence that a living creature should have in its eyes. The second Sky White Dragon that he had summoned was the one that he had truly unlocked its intelligence. As for why Pandora only asked him to help her awaken the intelligence of one of the 2 white dragons when she already had 2 of them, Dake thought for a while and guessed correctly. Since the original game referenced Yu-Gi-Oh in its gameplay, it was highly possible that the White Dragon of the Sky was based on the Blue Eyes White Dragon. If that was the case, this Celestial White Dragon was very likely to be one of the fusion materials. 3 blue-eyed white dragons could fuse into a blue-eyed ultimate dragon. Then the 3 Sky White Dragons should be able to fuse into a 3-headed Sky Ultimate Dragon, just like the 3 blue-eyed white dragons. After all, having 3 heads was different from having 1. If all 3 Sky White Dragons had intelligence, they would be assigned to 3 heads after fusion, and there would be problems with coordination and unity. If that was the case, it would be better to unlock the intelligence of one of the Sky White Dragons. However, Dake guessed that Senior Panduola hadn't managed to summon a 3rd Sky White Dragon yet. In the arena, the appearance of the second Sky White Dragon turned the situation around again. The Red Spine Black Dragon wasn't as strong as the Sky White Dragon in terms of strength. The scales of victory were slowly tilting towards Panduola's side. Good morning. I tried my best, but things didn't go as I wished. At midnight, the broadband was suddenly cut off for 2 hours. I wanted to use the hotspot on my phone to surf the internet, but I couldn't find the external wireless network card. After I found it, I didn't know why it couldn't be connected. Luckily, the internet was restored at 2 a.m. At 3:40 a.m., the monitor's power supply suddenly broke. Luckily, there was a backup power supply, or else I would have been dead. _. Although, I still want to ask for monthly votes. Chapter 649. In the following battle, Noah Sharp fought back repeatedly, but he was suppressed by Panduola every time. Neither of them summoned a magic elf that was more than 9 stars in the end. In the end, Panduola Doragon won the duel amidst the deafening cheers of the audience. What a pity. Noah Sharp kept his magic cards one by one, but he wasn't discouraged. Both of them had won and lost in the duels so far. If he lost today, he would win it back next time. He felt that he could win it back. Panduola didn't feel proud either. After she kept her magic cards, she was about to walk down the stage when Judy suddenly appeared and stopped her. Interview. Judy emphasized. Website. https://m. Vipcanshu. VIP Panduola had no choice but to stop and cooperate with Judy to complete the interview of the winner of the day. Dake looked at Panduola, who was holding the microphone and talking, but the beautiful figure of the sky-white dragon kept appearing in his mind. This made him want to cultivate the blue eyes white dragon even more. After the interview, the first day of the Gold Cup finally came to an end. Judy loudly announced the end of the first day of the competition and reminded the audience to leave the stage in an orderly manner and not to cause any stampedes. Dake and the others in the ring also stood up one after another. Are we going back to the dorm next? Doran asked. No. Dake smiled. I have to go to the club classroom. Then let's go. Deanna immediately pulled Luosi and said. Therefore the group split into two groups. Soon, Dake climbed up the spiral clock tower and entered the club classroom. Then he summoned the magician's secretary and the sabegu. The sabegu that pounced on him was immediately carried away by the sabegu, while Dake carried the fox grass that pounced on him. He took the tea set and sat on the sofa to brew tea while waiting for Yvette to come. He didn't have any special motive. He just wanted to have a video call with Yvette on Halloween night to chat about daily life. But when Eve arrived and connected with her using the consonant spell, Dake realized that there were too many people on the other side. Even though First Princess Elisha had already left by herself in a carriage. But Deanna's mother and Luosi's aunt were in the same carriage as Arvette. Of course, Claire was among them, working hard to soothe Galileo's grief. When Deanna and Luosi saw their mother and aunt, they immediately became cautious. Therefore, this video conference became a long-distance friendship between the three families. Camilla repeatedly reminded Deanna not to run around in the dungeon, and to bring the dungeon escape device. Viscountess Flotty asked Luosi if she was attending classes and eating well. She would also remind her to wear warmer clothes as the temperature dropped. On the other hand, Dake and Yalvet became bystanders. But the mother and son listened with great interest and didn't feel bored at all. The parents' meeting was short for an hour. They talked about work for half an hour. After 10:30 p.m., Eve finally cut off the consonant spell, under the reluctant gazes of the parents in front of her. Thank you for your hard work, Dake thanked her. Eve smiled and said, this is my duty. Compared to the training mission, it's not hard at all. The group chatted and laughed. They cleaned the tea set and left the club classroom together. That night, Dake absorbed 2 points of bliss and went to sleep. The next day, he went to the library and borrowed books related to second refinement. Perhaps because there were 2 duels last night, he didn't receive the weekend's competition schedule this morning. Since he was free, he took the related books and studied them in the reading room. There were some similarities between second refinement and directional refinement. They both required a very detailed understanding of the target magic fairy to be able to create the correct formula. Depending on the level of understanding of the magic fairy, the difficulty of mastering second refinement and directional refinement would also vary. After careful consideration, Dark decided to start his research from the magical fantasy beast. The reason why he chose fantasy beast was because it was only a 1-star monster and wasn't difficult to refine. The most expensive material on the list was a strand of fur that cost 1,000 credits. Secondly, he had 2 fantasy beast scrolls. Whether it was Ivan or the polymorph, he already had a thorough understanding of them. Thirdly, the refining of fantasy beast didn't require any major sins. Fourthly, he had a ready-made formula for fantasy beast's directional refinement. In fact, the directional refining formula for phantasmal beasts was the first directional refining formula that the little mages came into contact with. When the professors taught the students how to refine phantasmal beasts in the first grade, they used the directional refining formula. The only problem was that fantasy beast fur could only be bought from professors. However, Professor Kazair, who definitely had fantasy beast fur, was said to have been fooling around in the underground city since Friday. Then I can only look for other professors. But there's no rush. Perhaps by the time I grasp the basics, Professor Kazair will already be back. Dake smiled and headed to Traveler's Street after lunch. He was prepared to gather the other materials needed to refine Fantasy Beast. And he would also buy some other materials while he was at it. This person couldn't control himself when he was rich. Dake accidentally bought a bit too much. After he finished buying, he went to Cat Flower Shop, as usual. He placed the items at the door and entered the shop. Is Miss Cat here? Yes. Miss Cat, who looked extremely good today, poked her head out from the inner room. When she saw Dake, she immediately said enthusiastically, "Come and see what I brought." What? Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly entered Miss Cat's small room. The students of St. Marian Academy really had a variety of tastes. The experimental cat grass that had been piled up in the small room had basically been sold out. Only the goldfish grass, with dull eyes, was still standing. Of course, the goldfish grass had a new playmate. Dake entered and saw the goldfish grass playing with another goldfish grass. The scene of the two dull-eyed goldfish grass rubbing against each other was unbearable. However, Miss Cat was clearly excited when she observed them. Dake couldn't help but distance himself from her. Miss Cat didn't notice. She pointed at the other goldfish grass and said, "Didn't you mention to me that you wanted a carp grass?" "I have it." Dake calmed down and observed the carp grass. The structure of the carp grass was basically the same as the goldfish grass, except that the goldfish on the stem had turned into a carp. Dake boldly guessed that the factory behind Cat Flower and Wood Shop should have a relatively mature process of producing goldfish grass. Speaking of fish, other than the carp king that could evolve into violent carp dragon, Dake's favorite was the ugliness fish that could evolve into Minas. Although the carp king was a water type, Dake was quite confident that it could evolve with Fury, as Great Sin card. In addition, the probability of Minas evolving with Bliss was also very high. Other than that, it was not so easy to distinguish between pure water-type Pokemon. If it needed jealousy to evolve like the ball sea lion, its usable value would be greatly reduced. Thinking of this, Dake asked, "Since the carp grass has been developed, what about the other fish types? For example, the oarfish?" Miss Cat waved her hand and said, "It's not that easy. The oarfish is too difficult. The salamander is in the process of being developed." Dake could not help but say, "Salamander, that's not a fish, right?" "More or less." Miss Cat smiled and said, "I heard that someone wants to get a whale grass." "What a fantasy." Dake laughed and suddenly said, "But if it's a miniature whale grass, it's also a good choice." The giant whale in the Digimon and the howling whale king in the Pokemon were both super big guys that could be used as mounts. If he could cultivate one of these two types of magic conducting fairies, wouldn't it be as fun to go out to sea in the future? Unfortunately, such a beautiful dream was not easy to realize. Miss Cat looked at Dake and comforted him. "Actually, I have a piece of good news. Do you want to hear it?" Dake asked curiously, "What's to be careful of?" Miss Cat blinked and suddenly pointed at the two fish grass and said, "If you buy it and take it away, I'll tell you." Dake couldn't help but laugh dryly. Miss Cat must have seen that he was determined to get the carp grass. As for the goldfish grass, he had no intention of getting it at all. He had always suspected that the goldfish grass not only had the most basic water attribute, but it also had the hidden ghost attribute. However, Miss Cat showed a gentle expression and said, "Actually, this is the first time I've seen the goldfish grass so close to other cat grass. If you only buy the carp grass, it will become all alone again." "Dake, then I'll buy it." "Hey, since you've said so, how can I not buy it?" Miss Cat smiled and quickly said, "I've found a solution to the rabbit grass little problem. Believe me, in less than a month, you'll see a lively little rabbit that won't be scared to death easily." Dake's eyes lit up, and he was instantly in a good mood. He had been waiting for the rabbit grass and lion grass for almost half a year, and now there was finally good news. When he had the rabbit grass, he could think of a way to narrow down the range and refine it into a moon god beast. It didn't take a genius to figure out that the moon god stone would definitely be useful for the moon god beast. At that time, his Bliss card set would have a real treasure to hold the fort. In addition, there were a lot of rabbit-type Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh monsters, and they could be options in the future. Especially the one-star monster in Yu-Gi-Oh, the Little White Rabbit, which was a powerful monster with super high defense. If he could refine it, it would definitely be a supermodel among supermodels. A super offering among one-star monsters. Since he had decided, Dake didn't hesitate anymore. He quickly paid the goldfish grass and carp grass credits and summoned the magic elf to help transport it. The way to raise the goldfish grass and carp grass was easier than the other cat grasses. Generally speaking, all they had to do was to place them in the shade and avoid direct sunlight. Then they would be watered every day and that would be enough. Of course, if the conditions were right, he could put the flower pot on the surface of the water and put the stem in the water, and the two carp grass would slowly swim in the water. It wouldn't look so gloomy. Since I've got the carp grass, then I can finally refine the carp king or violent carp dragon. It just so happens that I still have the water type, dragon grass. I can use the carp grass and dragon grass to cultivate two sets of fury fruit and use the dragon grass and the dragon grass as the core to reduce the random range to the limit. If that's the case, there's also a chance of directly producing violent carp dragon. This is a good idea, I have to remember it. Dake took out his notebook and quickly wrote it down. He temporarily kept the goldfish grass and carp grass in the fountain in the middle of the club's classroom, and he could use them whenever he wanted. That night, after he extracted 2 more bliss points, he finally started to refine the clown mask. After such a long period of research, he already knew how to refine the clown mask, and the experiment this time was very successful. Before the 24 p.m. of November 2nd arrived, Dake successfully completed the experiment. The material value of the clown mask was even higher than the magical brain dropper. However, its flaw was very obvious. It could only force the person wearing the mask to smile, but it could not make the person smile from the heart. If that was the case, even if the material value was higher, it could only be used as a useless tool to change one's expression. Therefore, Dake thought of adding bliss to make it a pleasant mask that could really make the person smile from the heart. The in-depth research on bliss also helped him to quickly refine the clown mask. During tonight's refinement, he added a total of 3 bliss points and successfully refined the clown mask into a brand new item card. He used a pair of tweezers to rinse the card, and it was soon clean. After the water on the card was dried, Dake slowly took the card in front of him to take a closer look. At this time, the image on the card was very different from the original clown mask. The most obvious change was that the original white base was now dyed with a layer of pink. The makeup on the card was also more flirtatious. If the previous clown mask was a male clown, then the picture on the props card was a female clown. This was indeed the change that bliss could bring. Dake calmed himself down and injected his mana into the magic card, and through the feedback he checked the specific data. Card name, clown mask, type, item card, effect 1 pleasure +3, rationality -3. Effect 2, comes with the ultimate skill laughing clown. Effect 3, comes with the ultimate skill laughing ghost face. The card name directly became clown mask. Just like the bronze snake lens, it has 3 effects and 2 of them are ultimate skills. Let's not talk about ultimate skills first. The +3 pleasure and -3 rationality effects are similar to what I expected. With pleasure +3, I'll have to be careful. Dake tapped the card surface, but he did not summon the clown mask immediately. Pleasure +3 would make bliss easier to level up, and just like the dazzling night pearl, it was not suitable for him to use. Fortunately, most of his Magitech sprites had mastered the ability to output and control magic, so they could do it for him. And these 2 ultimate skills, Clown Mask and Clown Mask, if I'm not mistaken, they have a positive effect and a negative effect? With that thought in mind, Dake injected more mana into the Clown Mask to take a closer look. Laughing Piercing Clown. The clown that has fallen into madness will stimulate its potential in order to fulfill its joy. Its attack will continue to rise and its defense will continue to fall. Duration of 3 minutes. Once activated, it cannot be deactivated. This is. When Dake saw the effects of this ultimate skill, he could not help but be shocked. 3 minutes was a very long time. If he could continuously convert defense into attack, it would be equivalent to a power trick in disguise, but it was limited to his own use. Other than the decrease in defense and partial loss of rationality, there were no aftereffects of the ultimate skill. The limitation was that once activated, it could not be deactivated. However, whether it was practical or not still depended on the speed at which the defense was converted into attack. If it was too slow, its usefulness would be greatly reduced. With that thought in mind, he looked around and stared at the little devil monster. No, it's not easy to observe the little devil monster's attack and defense. I have the basic attributes of the Diru beast, but part of it is given by the holy ring, so it can't be converted. Wait, Diru beast, come here. It was a good opportunity to test if it could be converted, right? Dake could not help but smile. As the incarnation of pride, the Diru beast's ability to hold back its laughter should be very strong, right? When the Diru beast heard the call, it put down the book in its hand and jumped down from the small bed. It quickly walked to Dake's side. Dake patted its knee. The Diru beast's face immediately turned red, but it still turned its back and let Dake pick it up and put it on its knee. Meow. Fairy Ibu, who was peeking out from the bedding, was unhappy. However, the ruthless Dake Dimming did not care about it. Instead, he told the Diru beast about the effects of the clown mask. After the Diru beast heard it, it nodded slightly, indicating that it could do it. Dake then summoned the clown mask and let it wear it. The originally hard mask suddenly softened after it was attached to the skin and flesh. It wriggled and completely stuck to the face. The Diru beast carefully felt the energy coming from the mask and clenched its nails. Even if it didn't trigger the killing move, the clown mask, S+3 pleasure and -3 rationality, could still make the person wearing the mask lose control. However, the Diru beast endured it. Dake nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "Activate the killing move. Clown mask." The Diru beast immediately poured magic into the mask on its face to trigger the killing move. That mask emitted a faint blood-red light. The already exaggerated smile on its thick lips split open to its ears and continued to tear upwards. Jia jia jia. The Diru beast's wild laughter suddenly burst out from its mouth. Fairy Ibu, who had been a little jealous a moment ago, was suddenly overjoyed. As for the Diru beast, the cat, it clasped its hands together as it burst out laughing, using its terrifying endurance to prevent its hands from flailing. But its body was still shaking like a chaff, and it couldn't help but let out a joyful laugh. Seeing this, Dake immediately picked up the Diru beast's magic guide card and checked the changes in its attack and defense. Diru beast's attack and defense were at 1900, and with the Holy Ring's support, both were increased by 500. After Laughing Piercing Clown was activated, its meager defense decreased at a speed visible to the naked eye. Its attack power, just as Dake thought, also increased at the same speed. In the blink of an eye, its 900 defense was completely reduced to 0. Its body was emitting a scarlet light, and it was afraid that any attack would injure it. As for its attack power, it increased to 2,800 before completely stopping. As for the Holy Ring's bonus of 500 attributes, it wasn't included in the calculation. Thus, when the conversion stopped, Diru beast's attack power was at 3,300, and its defense was at 500. 500 defense was the minimum. Its attack power of 3,300 even exceeded the peak of a 6-star magic guide fairy. If it activated the Holy Sword Dance, or Double Slash, its power would be unimaginable. Unfortunately, it was difficult to activate Sword Dance, or Double Slash, while it was laughing. However, difficult meant that the possibility was not 0. If I use the Bond's spiritual power as support, is it possible to share the negative effects and allow it to gain a certain level of rational behavior? Dake could not help but ponder. Also, does Mad Lion Beast have any experience in fighting against madness? Forget it. It will most likely become even crazier and completely lose its rationality. Dake shook his head, tapped on the clown mask, magic guide card, and tried to forcefully recall it. But he failed. It cannot be recalled within 3 minutes. Dake could only hug the Diru beast and continue to wait. The experiment results were out. Clown Mask's attack and defense increased at a high speed of 100 points per second. Even a 4th-tier magic guide fairy, with 6,000 points of defense, could complete the conversion within a minute. Dake took the opportunity to check on another ultimate skill. Clown Mask forcefully put the clown mask on the opponent's face, causing the opponent to fall into a state of uncontrollable laughter as if possessed. Its defense will gradually collapse in the process of laughing. Lasts for 3 minutes. Under normal circumstances, it cannot be removed by itself. As expected of an ultimate skill that can be forcefully put on the opponent's face. But at this time, where should I find a test subject? Dake shook his head slightly, realizing that he could only test it tomorrow. However, since Clown Mask only reduced defense and did not increase attack, the defense reduction effect would definitely not be as good as Clown Mask. It's most likely reduced. But the defense reduction effect is an unexpected surprise. My original plan was to use it as a single target control skill that would make the opponent unable to do anything other than laugh. The current effect is already beyond satisfactory. Dake waited patiently for 3 minutes, and the effect of Clown Mask finally ended. He immediately recalled it into the magic guide card, patted the Diru beast's head, and said, "Thank you for your hard work." The Diru beast raised its head slightly, and the remaining effect of the ultimate skill made it smile with joy. Clown Mask's effect could be said to be a pleasant surprise. However, it was already late. Dake tidied up the remnants of the experiment and continued to practice Underworld Spirit spell. After half an hour, he fell into a deep sleep. Sunday morning, 6 o'clock sharp. Dake woke up with the call of his biological clock. Then he used the access card to send a message to Professor Kazair. He only received a reply at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. Professor Kazair had returned from the dungeon. Dake did not know what he was researching. The other professors also avoided talking about it. Although he was curious, he did not ask. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Dake followed the agreement with Professor Kazair and arrived at Professor Kazair's dormitory. Knock knock. Kacha. Dake knocked twice and Professor Kazair's dormitory door opened from the inside. He was wearing dark blue pajamas and a nightcap, and his body was still steaming. It was obvious that he had just taken a shower. "Come in, I've made some black tea." After seeing Dake, Professor Kazair smiled from the bottom of his heart and extended his hand to bring him into the room. "You want the fur of the fantasy beast? How many do you want?" He pushed the steaming teacup in front of Dark and said in a kind tone. Dake thought for a moment, raised a finger and asked, "How about 10? 1 was 1,000 credits, 10 was 10,000 credits. Although it was expensive, if he wanted to master the basics of second refinement, he could not be stingy with resources. Is 10 enough?" Professor Kazair asked curiously. "You want to learn second refinement on your own, right? The failure rate of second refinement is very high, especially for beginners." Dark couldn't help but reveal a bit of embarrassment as he said, Just 10 for now. If I use them all up, I'll come back to buy more." Professor Kazair shook his head and said, 100. 10,000 credits is not much for you, right? Dark hurriedly said, "If it's 100, Only 10,000 credits?" Professor Kazair was puzzled. "Of course I've always bought them like this." Dake could not help but say, "But last time I..." "No, but isn't the fur of the fantasy beast very, very rare?" Professor Kazair could not help but laugh. "Of course it's rare. But isn't it rare?" Dake. "Oh right. 71 of 139. Good morning. I'm full of energy today, please vote." Chapter 650. Dake, who had sneaked out of Professor Kazair's dormitory, was secretly delighted. If he were to sell 100 strands of fantastical beast's hair, he would earn 10 times the profit. Of course, he would not do that. After all, people should not forget their bottom line for small profits. It was just that he did not expect to be able to buy 100 strands of Fantastical Beast's hair, so he only prepared 10 sets of materials. The Fantastical Beast's hair had many uses. Apart from refining Fantastical Beast, it could also be used to refine Surekill's skill. Transformation. However, the research on Surekill's skill card had stagnated for a long time, so it was not suitable to take it out again. I'll wait for the future. With that thought, Dake went to Traveler's Street again, and brought back materials worth tens of thousands of credits. Every time he bought so many materials, he could not help but sigh. It was great to have a Halloween event. Remember, https://m, vipcanchu, VIP 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Dake prepared everything and began the preliminary experiment. These 100 strands of Fantastical Beast's hair should be enough for me to master the basic method of second refinement. But before second refinement, I must first have a magic card that can be refined. Let's refine Fantastical Beast first. The directional refinement of Fantastical Beast itself is not difficult. There are relatively many refining steps, and if I can refine multiple sets at the same time, I can also compress the time as much as possible. But for the first set, I'll warm up my hands first. Dake thought for a while and began his experiment. So far, he had successfully refined the illusory beast twice. The result of the first refinement was Fantastical Beast, Ibu, and the result of the second refinement was Fantastical Beast, ever-changing monster. These two magic fairies were extremely compatible with the characteristics of Fantastical Beast, so it was not surprising to refine either one. Of course, because they were both fantastical beasts, they were refined in a directional manner, and not randomly. Therefore, there were still many uncertain factors in the directional refinement of fantastical beasts, which was very special. I wonder what kind of illusory beast I'll be refining this time. Anyway, I hope it's either illusory beast, Ibu, or illusory beast, multiform monster. That way, it'll be easier to learn and master second refinement. After Dake focused his mind, he began to move quickly. From the construction of the base to the engraving of the number 1 refining formation. The refining process this time was forcefully compressed into 10 minutes, and the final product was satisfactory. In the process of refining the materials, Dake put in the magic beast's hair, and the most important material, the saliva of a demon god. Human saliva contained a variety of substances. When there were too many core materials, the appropriate addition of saliva would have a catalytic effect on refining. Professor Ka Zayer's guidance was the reason why Dake had added saliva to his experiment. However, he gradually discovered that the effect of the saliva he added was far from that. The reason why he rarely failed in making magic elven cards was closely related to the effect of this saliva. In addition to the first refinement, adding a little demon god's material could also increase the quality of the magic elven card. In short, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. There was no reason not to use a ready-made trick. When the first refinement was completed, the golden threads separated from the number 1 refining formation, wrapped around the magic elven card layer by layer. In the end, a golden cocoon was formed. Next, all that was left was to inject magic into the cocoon, and at the same time inject his own expectations into it. Then the fantastical beast would respond to the Magus' expectations, showing the Magus' inner desires. In short, that was what the tutorial said. However, in reality, there would of course be some discrepancies. Otherwise, the illusory beast, multiform monster, would not have been born. Dake's second refinement should be the second illusory beast, Ibu. Following a slight movement inside the cocoon, Dake let go of his hand, and saw a crack on the outer shell of the golden cocoon, like a chick hatching from its shell. Golden light shot out from the crack and spread out to both sides, completely swallowing the golden cocoon. When the light disappeared, only the final product was left on the table. There were not many impurities on the surface of the magic elven card, so he could see the picture on the surface of the card at first glance. Then he could not help but frown. The picture on the surface of the card was not the cute little Ibu, nor was it the limp multiform monster, but an unknown little sheep. Picture. The little sheep squatted on the surface of the card like a mouse, with its back facing the outside. Its fur was fluffy and curly, but it was pitch black, and a hypnotic ring was hanging from its long, pointy mouse tail. This was the magic elven card from Yu-Gi-Oh! Fantasy Sheep. Although the Fantasy Sheep on the surface of the card was much cuter than the real card in Yu-Gi-Oh!, its basic composition was still very unique. Dake did not think he would make a mistake. If it really is the Fantasy Sheep, then it's not bad. His eyebrows gradually relaxed, and he picked up the magic elven card to take a closer look. Fantasy Sheep was a 3-star magic elven card in Yu-Gi-Oh!, but its attack and defense values were very average. It had a similar effect to the famous Swamp Demon King, and could be used as a substitute for one's fusion material. However, it was not like the Swamp Demon King, which could add a fusion card from the deck to the hand by sending itself to the graveyard. It could only replace one's fusion material. Card name: Fantasy Beast Fantasy Sheep. Type: Elven card. Level: Race: Bird/Beast. Attribute: Ground. Magic power: 100 attack, 100 defense, 100 ultimate skill. Fusion Finger. Fusion Finger. The Fantasy Sheep can replace one of the first tier's recorded fusion materials to participate in the fusion. At this time, the fusion materials other than the Fantasy Sheep must be the real fusion materials. In other words, using this Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep, could replace the Diru Beast, and, wait, the first tier? Dake furrowed his brows. The restriction of the first tier made him stunned for a moment. Although he only had the Diru Beast and the Black Diru Beast as fusion materials, both of them were the real second tier. Moreover, the restriction of recorded fusion materials also prevented him from creating something out of nothing. Isn't this too much? The joy that just rose in his heart was reduced by a lot. However, Dake thought about it for a while and felt that it was acceptable. If the 1-star Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep, is the first tier, then what about the 2-star one? What about the 3-star one? If that's the case, I'll use second refinement to strengthen it to 2-star or even 3-star. Dake's eyes lit up, and he suddenly had more motivation to research. A fusion material card like the Fantasy Sheep was a necessary part of the fusion deck. However, in reality at this point in time, although there were very few mage trainers who were good at using fusion deck, no one had ever refined a fusion material card with the fusion reference ability. In addition, fusion would naturally cause a large amount of magic power to be consumed, so the fusion deck was a very unpopular deck. Basically, no one cared about it. Most of the mage trainers would only add a fusion card to the deck to enrich the deck. If Dake could refine more similar fantasy beasts, perhaps the fusion deck could be developed and the glory of fusion could be revived. Stop. Dake quickly stopped his imagination and summoned the Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep, to take a look. The Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep, was only the size of a volleyball and was very light. Although it could not be said to be as light as a balloon, it was very easy to hold in his hand. He did not activate its intelligence. After observing and recording it, he kept it back into the magic card. Then he continued his experiment. Dake increased the difficulty of the second refinement. The materials needed for each step had to be boiled in 2 portions, and then completed within a time limit. This was the first time he had refined multiple magic cards at the same time. Everything was full of challenges. Thanks to the fact that every step of the Fantasy Beast was short and simple, he succeeded on his first try. In the end, he managed to cultivate 2 Fantasy Beast cards at once. After injecting his magic power and thoughts into the 2 golden cocoons on the table, the golden cocoons automatically split open, and 2 intact Fantasy Beast cards appeared in front of him. When he realized that refining 2 Fantasy Beast cards at the same time was the limit, he noticed that one of the Fantasy Beast cards was Fantasy Beast Ibu. I've actually refined it. Dake's face suddenly revealed a look of ecstasy. This was no doubt a huge milestone, because not only was it his first time refining an identical Fantasy Beast, but it was also his first time refining an identical Magic Fairy. Among the Magic Elf cards that he had made so far, he had never made a duplicate Magic Elf card. This made him have a vague, ominous thought in his heart. Was it impossible for him to make repeated Magic Elven cards? Adding multiple magic fairy cards with the same name to the deck was the key to purifying the deck and preventing it from getting stuck. If he was unable to refine multiple magic fairy cards with the same name, he would always be at a disadvantage in this aspect. Of course, more importantly, if he could only refine one blue-eyed white dragon card, then how would he be able to fuse 3 fusion cards? Hence, the refining of this fantasy beast, Earbook card was very crucial. Without a doubt, it broke through this layer of concern, allowing Dake's thoughts to become clear in an instant. If this is the case, the learning of second refinement can also be on the right track. Dake picked up the fantasy beast, Earbook card, and examined it. Apart from a small fringe on the forehead, this fantasy beast, Earbook, was exactly the same as the first one. Of course, this included the card's name, level, race, attribute, magic, attack, defense, and surekill skill. Looking at the only surekill skill, imitation, Dake couldn't help but reveal a carefree smile. Squeak, squeak. But just as he was immersed in joy, little Earbook, who had been secretly watching from the side, suddenly ran over with its short little legs. Dake put aside his thoughts for now and squatted down to pick up its little legs, putting them on his knees and asking, "What's wrong?" Squeak, squeak, squeak. Earbook's front legs were restricted, so it could only desperately use its big eyes to glance at the fantasy beast, Earbook card. Dake couldn't help but laugh. It's still a magic fairy card that hasn't gained sentience yet. I don't plan on gaining sentience for now, so you don't have to worry too much. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Earbook hurriedly shook its head. Dake guessed, "You don't care? You want me to help it gain sentience and keep it company with you?" Squeak, squeak, squeak. There was a hint of impatience in Earbook's voice. Dake frowned slightly. Seeing that the variegated monster wasn't in the dormitory, he picked up little Earbook and put it on the table. He then took out a pen and paper from the drawer and had it write down its thoughts. Earbook-chan picked up a pen and started writing. After half a minute, Dake finally understood what it meant, and an indescribable shock appeared in his eyes. "If it's really like what you wrote." He picked up Earbook and seriously looked into its eyes, then quickly took out the fantasy beast, Earbook card that belonged to it. "Will it really work? Are you sure?" Dake asked. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Earbook nodded vigorously, its eyes shining. Dake took a deep breath and aligned the 2 fantasy beast, Earbook cards, and stacked them together. Then he released Earbook's summon. When Earbook's consciousness returned to the magic card, he treated the 2 fantasy beast, Earbook cards as one, and then used the normal summoning spell. Such a messy summoning method actually succeeded, and in the end, it only summoned one Earbook. He hurriedly opened the 2 fantasy beast, Earbook cards, and found that the 2 magic cards had entered a state where they couldn't be used. This was extremely inconceivable, and completely overturned the common sense that he had always grasped. It's impossible that no one has tried this before. Is it because of the uniqueness of the fantasy beast, or the uniqueness of the great sin? Dake looked at Earbook, trying to calm himself down, and said, "Then next, release the summon." Squeak, squeak. Earbook nodded. Dake released the summon again. But the light that Earbook turned into split into 2, and entered the 2 magic cards separately. This wasn't fusion or fusion release. It was just a simultaneous summon of 2. Dake took out the fantasy beast, Earbook card with bangs on its forehead, and summoned it again. But the Earbook that appeared from the summoning light suddenly jumped into Dake's arms, and happily stuck out its tongue to lick Dake's face. Its eyes were filled with spirituality. Dake immediately believed that this was its Earbook. Through this method of synchronous summoning, Eevee transferred his consciousness from the original, illusory beast, Eevee, to the second illusory beast, Eevee, that he had just refined. What is this, changing the skin? Looking at the bangs on Earbook's head, Dake couldn't help but ridicule. On the surface, apart from a slight change in Ivan's appearance, there were no other changes. But in his heart, he already had a more concrete idea. If this phenomenon was universal, he could use the method of transferring consciousness to let the magic fairy completely avoid the risk of second refinement. He only needed to temporarily transfer the magic fairy to another magic card with the same name during the second refinement. When the refinement was completed, he could transfer it back, and the experiment of second refinement could be carried out without any risk. Additionally, he had a bold guess. The magic card with the same name that was created during the second refinement might not be able to gain sentience. Should I give it a try? If my hypothesis is correct, it means that the magic fairy's sentience is unlocked, and it is unique. Dake was itching to make a move. Now that he had created the second fantasy beast, Earbook card with great difficulty, if his hypothesis failed and he created a second Earbook with sentience, then this fantasy beast, Earbook card would not be able to be used in the second refinement experiment. But if he didn't try to prove it, his whole body would itch, and his thoughts would not be clear. Earbook, what do you think? 2 minutes later, Dake transferred Earbook's consciousness back to the original fantasy beast, Earbook card, and then took out a Pride Eye card. After summoning the second fantasy beast, Earbook card, he began to unlock its sentience. But under the radiance of Pride Eye, this second fantasy beast, Earbook, did not unlock its sentience. So it's true. Dake's eyes lit up. He temporarily named this phenomenon the principle of uniqueness of magic fairy sentience. If he could further prove it and confirm whether it was universal, and whether it could be applied to other magisters' magic fairies, the proof of this theory might cause a stir in the academic world. But from the looks of it, the proof of this principle worked, and it allowed him to be bolder during the refinement and second refinement of the same name magic cards. But that was actually very important. Dake removed the Earbook without sentience from summoning it, and then re-summoned the real Earbook. After that, he had the time to check on the other Fantasy Beast card that he had created at the same time. Card name, Fantasy Beast Curse Fusion Creature Light. Type, Fairy card. Level, Race, Elemental. Attribute, Light. Magic power, 100 attack, 100 defense, 100 killing move. Fusion Finger, Fusion of Light. Curse Fusion Creature, Light, was the same as Fantasy Sheep. It was also a fusion material card in Yu-Gi-Oh! But Dake did not have much of an impression of it, and this Fantasy Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Light, card was completely different from the original Curse Fusion Creature, Light card. The original Curse Fusion Creature, Light, was a fusion of brain, internal organs, and limbs, a spherical creature that made one's scalp tingle. But this Curse Fusion Creature, Light, card was a huge ball of light with a curse seal in the middle. It was not much different from an ordinary light elemental life. Dake casually summoned the entire ball of light, then reached out and rubbed it. He only felt that the inside of the ball of light was soft, warm, and excellent to the touch. He then looked at the two killing moves of Fantasy Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Light. The first one was Fusion Finger, which was exactly the same as Fusion Finger of Fantasy Sheep. The data of the fusion material must be recorded first before it could be replaced, and it was temporarily limited to the first tier. As for the second killing move, it was a special upgraded version of Fusion Finger, Fusion of Light, including the fusion material referred to by Curse Fusion Creature, Light. This set of fusion materials can be offered as a sacrifice, and the corresponding light elemental magic fairy can be specially summoned. At first glance, it was hard to understand, but after thinking about it carefully, Dake realized the practicality of this killing move. Using Fusion of Light, although the fusion elemental magic fairy must be of the light element, there was no need to use the fusion magic card, and it could be directly sacrificed to summon it. Another drawback of the Fusion series card set was that once the Fusion-type magic card could not be drawn, it could only wait for death. The appearance of the killing move Fusion of Light could very well alleviate this awkwardness. Moreover, if Fantasy Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Light, could be upgraded to the level of being able to replace the third-tier fusion materials, it might even be able to replace Advanced Fusion. If he wanted to use the third-tier fusion materials to fuse the fourth-tier magic fairy, Advanced Fusion was essential. However, the difficulty of refining Advanced Fusion was not much lower than the difficulty of refining the fourth-tier magic fairy. In order to evolve Demoness Beast and Fairy Beast into Most High Beast in his dream, Dake had looked up the relevant information long ago. But in fact, even Senior Panduola had not been able to successfully refine Advanced Fusion. Therefore, he was very rational and stopped his research. but is Most High Beast of the light element or the dark element? Although it is the same as Basti Beast, a digital beast formed by the fusion of light and dark elements, it is an angel type. The probability of it being of the light element is actually higher. Dake looked at the big ball of light in front of him, and could not help but look forward to it. After he finished recording the stages, he put Curse Fusion Creature, Light, back into the magic card and continued his experiment. He still carried out 2 refinements at the same time. This time, it took him about 15 minutes to craft 2 Illusory Beast cards. These 2 Fantasy Beast cards, one was Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep, and the other was Fantasy Beast Ibu. The second one was Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep. The third one was Fantasy Beast, Ibu. So far, he had used up a total of 5 Fantasy Beast hairs and had the practice material for second refinement. Dake decided to temporarily stop refining Fantasy Beast and study second refinement first. The first target he chose to refine was without a doubt Illusory Beast, Ibu. There are 2 Fantasy Beast, Ibu cards that can be used for second refinement. Hopefully, I can learn something. With that thought in mind, Dake followed the book's instructions and began his second refinement. Second refinement and directional refinement had very similar basic requirements. Fortunately, Dake had mastered the directional refinement of Fantasy Beast, so he could try to get started. However, it was not that easy to achieve results. He began his first attempt at second refinement at 4 in the afternoon and ended at 5 in the afternoon. The first Fantasy Beast, Ibu card was successfully scrapped. Ibu had painfully lost a piece of skin. After that, he spent more time turning this failure into experience. At 6:30 after dinner, he began his second attempt at second refinement. Under Ibu's wide-eyed gaze, it painfully lost a second piece of skin. It's gone. After the failure, Dake winked at Ibu with interest, which made it so angry that it crawled under the blanket and only revealed its little butt. After the 2 Fantasy Beast, Ibu cards were scrapped, Dake was not in a hurry to refine them. Instead, he took out one of the Fantasy Beast, Imaginary Sheep, and performed second refinement on it. He knew nothing about Fantasy Beast, Imaginary Sheep, so this second refinement experiment was bound to fail. However, through this method, he could magnify the reason for the failure and analyze it to a certain extent. However, in order to prevent himself from being unable to refine Fantasy Beast, Imaginary Sheep in the future, he saved the first one. After the Fantasy Beast, Fantasy Sheep, was scrapped, Dark stopped experimenting. He focused his attention on studying and analyzing the book until late into the night. The short holiday that came with Halloween passed just like that. The next day, Monday. Although the students still hadn't broken free from the holiday atmosphere, the professors would help them remember what time it was. From this day onwards, Professor Shierfu began to focus on explaining how to use the secret instrument card for ritual summoning. He also gave out the secret instrument card and the ritual summoning card for teaching purposes. In a magic duel, the ritual summoning triggered by the secret instrument card could ignore the cards in hand and directly summon, or summon additional magic elven cards from the deck that fit the ritual requirements. Although this type of special summoning had certain restrictions, it was much faster and more convenient than the sacrificial summoning at certain times, so it was very popular. However, this type of secret instrument card was equally difficult to refine. In short, the more useful the secret instrument card was, the more difficult it was to refine. Dake listened attentively to the lecture, but he did not plan to delve deeper into it. Biting off more than one could chew. In the following introduction to magic, Professor Kazair continued to explain how to rely on oneself to research the formula of directional enchantment. The difficulty was no less than refining the secret instrument card, which made the little mages complain incessantly. On the contrary, there was a comparison. The potionology, which was originally a headache in the first year, had now become the easiest subject other than history of magic and magical beasts. In fact, in order to successfully obtain resources from the dungeon, learning magical beasts was essential. In order to refine a truly powerful secret instrument card, Learning history of magic was extremely crucial. In addition, mathematics and magical language were still very difficult. Even the dual-class difficulty had suddenly increased by a lot. In the first 3 days of this week, the little mages in the second year all experienced physical discomfort. The sudden increase in academic pressure even affected Dake. He could not help but slow down his research on second refinement. However, in these 3 days he still gained a lot. First was the refining of magical beasts. In 3 days he refined a total of 12 new magical beasts. Basically, he maintained a rate of 4 per day. Of these 12 magical beasts, 3 were new skins of magical beast. Ibu, 2 were magical beast, multiform monster, 1 was magical beast, fantasy sheep, 1 was magical beast, incantation creature, light, and the remaining 4 were all new magical beasts. From this, it could be seen that illusory beast, Ibu, had the highest probability of appearing when illusory beast was refined. This basically confirmed Dark's initial guess of illusory beast. It was designed with Ibu as the prototype. In addition, the probability of magical beast, multiform monster, was not low, which was very good news. Basically, he only had a good understanding of magical beast, Ibu, and magical beast, multiform monster, to meet the basic requirements of second refinement. The final experiment would definitely revolve around these 2 magic guiding fairies. Of course, the 7 old magical beasts had all turned into the experience of second refinement. As for the remaining 4 new magical beasts, the first one was magical beast, incantation creature, dark. Card name, magical beast incantation creature dark. Type, spirit card. Level, race, elemental. Attribute, dark. Magic power, 100. Attack, 100. Defense, 100. Killing move, fusion finger, fusion of darkness. Magical beast, incantation creature dark, and magical beast, incantation creature light, other than having different attributes, were basically the same copy. However, compared to magical beast, incantation creature light, Dake obviously placed more emphasis on magical beast, incantation creature dark, because Basti beast was a dark elemental magical spirit. According to his prediction, as long as magical beast, incantation creature dark was strengthened once, it could replace the fusion card and a fusion material, and fuse with Diru beast, or Black Diru beast, to evolve into Basti beast. Not to mention the construction of the fusion series of cards, it was also very useful in actual combat. Unfortunately, there was only one magical beast, incantation creature, dark, that was refined this time. The second new magical beast was magical beast, demon beast king of the swamp. Demon beast king of the swamp and demon god king of the swamp could be seen from the difference in the card name. Demon beast king of the swamp was lower than demon god king of the swamp. In fact, it did not send itself to the graveyard to add the additional effect of fusion from the card deck to the hand. Card name, magical beast, demon beast king of the swamp. Type, spirit card. Level, race fiend. Attribute, water. Magic power, 100. Attack, 100. Defense, 100. Ultimate skill, fusion finger. Abyss fusion, other than the ultimate skill fusion finger. Magical beast, demon beast king of the swamp, had a second ultimate skill, abyss fusion. Abyss fusion, even if the demon beast king of the swamp falls into the abyss, it can still replace a first-tier fusion material to participate in the fusion. At this time, the other fusion material must be the real fusion material. The existence of this ultimate skill meant that magical beast, demon beast king of the swamp, could continue to be a fusion material after death. Although it was limited to how long after death, it could not be tested at the moment. However, just this point alone made it completely outclassed fantasy beast, fantasy sheep, in terms of applicability. However, compared to magical beast, fantasy sheep, magical beast, demon beast king of the swamp, seemed to be more difficult to refine. If there were not enough to support the success of second refinement, magical beast, demon beast king of the swamp, S value would be very limited. The last 2 new magic card were a pair of cards with the same name. Card name, magical beast goddess of the heart's eye. Type, fairy card. level. Race, angel, attribute, light, magic power, 100 attack, 100 defense, 100, ultimate skill. Fusion finger, angel fusion, goddess of the heart's eye. The moment Dake refined this card, he felt a very weak divine aura from it. Although the divine aura was so weak that it could be mistaken for an illusion, it was indeed there. He could not figure out how the directional refinement of magical beast could be used to refine a magical fairy card that was labeled as a god. Moreover, there were two of them at the same time. There were no classes on Wednesday afternoon. Therefore, Dake continued his research on the second refinement in the dorm early in the morning. After using up all the magical beast that he had refined previously, he had no choice but to refine a new set of magical beast. However, he did not expect to refine two goddess of the heart's eye this time. On the surface, goddess of the heart's eye did not look too different from the other fusion material cards. They both had the same ultimate skill, fusion finger. Its uniqueness lay in its second ultimate skill, angel fusion. Angel fusion. The goddess of the heart's eye can replace any second-tier light element or angel fusion material to participate in the fusion. At this time, the other fusion material must be the real fusion material. Magical beast. That was also a 1-star, magical beast. The other fusion material cards could only replace the first-tier fusion material. However, goddess of the heart's eye could replace the second-tier fusion material. Although angel fusion had a huge limitation in its usage, it could only replace the light element or angel-type second-tier fusion material. However, wasn't this a perfect match for Diru Beast and Fairy Beast? E76.5/139 Good morning. I'm full of energy today. I'm begging for monthly votes. Chapter 651. From the looks of it, only the goddess with the heart's eye can replace the Diru Beast and the Heidi Beast for fusion. This way, the Basti Beast and the Angelus Beast can appear at the same time. But is the Basti Beast, that evolved from the goddess of the heart, and the Heidalu Beast still the original Basti Beast? That's obviously not possible. Thinking of this, Dake began to seriously consider a question. Should he activate the goddess with the heart's eye? Originally, he had been thinking about this question because the other mythical beasts were all fusion material cards except for the mythical beast, Ibu, and the mythical beast, ever-changing monsters. Currently, there was only one set of enchanted spirits that could be used for fusion, so it was not a problem for the time being. But what if there were more enchanted spirits that could be fused in the future? If these fusion material cards were to activate their intelligence, would their consciousness collapse due to frequent fusion with different enchanted spirits and other serious problems? Since there was no precedent for this question, he could only speculate on his own, which was why it had been delayed until now. But now the two mythical beast, goddess with the heart's eye that he had refined were enchanted cards with some divinity. Initial website. https://m. But can't you? VIP. According to Bichimo's experience, these divinities could be magnified. Moreover, it was very likely that the mythical beast, goddess with the heart's eye, would gain the passive characteristic of hypostasis +1. Although hypostasis +1 would not bring about a specific numerical increase, the effect it had in actual combat was more useful than numerical increase. However, as a pure fusion material card, the mythical beast, goddess with the heart's eye, did not require much of hypostasis +1. The two sure kill skills of the mythical beast, goddess with the heart's eye, had a clear restriction on the grade of the substitutable fusion material. Under such circumstances, even if hypostasis +1 was obtained, it would not be able to increase the grade of the substitutable fusion material. For a moment, Dake really could not think of the use of hypostasis +1. However, the situation now was that there was a clear path to upgrade in front of him. How could he not use it? After careful consideration, Dake finally decided to activate its intelligence. After all, she's a goddess. Her tolerance towards chaotic consciousness should be higher, right? He placed the two illusory beast, goddess of the heart's eye, in front of him and made a comparison. The two illusionary beast, goddess of the heart's eye, cards had long-haired women praying with their eyes closed, but there was a third eye between their brows that was always open, emitting a purple light. The Heart's Eye goddess, on the left, looked more mature, while the Heart's Eye goddess, on the right, looked younger. Generally speaking, it was the difference between 25, 26, and 17 ***. His hairstyle was also slightly different because of this. Everyone has to start from scratch after gaining sentience. Perhaps it would be easier for them to get used to it with a younger face. Dake pondered for a moment and chose the fantasy beast, goddess of the mind's eye, that looked about 17 or 18 years old. If it's the Great Sin card, I'll choose the Arrogance card. Dake directly took out the Arrogance card and cast the usual summoning spell on the fantasy beast, goddess of the mind's eye card. Immediately after, the three-eyed goddess appeared in front of him. She was over 1.7 meters tall, with a barren chest, slender and tall. Her long brown hair was soft and smooth, and her facial features were clear and beautiful. Her temperament was outstanding. However, the third eye between her brows had completely ruined her appearance. It was a vertical pupil that was obviously too big. The purple eyeball was sandwiched in the middle by the bulging eyelids. When the eyeball rolled, it would cause the eyelids to squirm, making one's hair stand on end. Please close your eyes when it's dark, Dake quickly said. The fantasy beast, goddess of the mind's eye, closed its heart's eye. The senses it gave off instantly increased by several levels. Don't open your eyes in the future, Dake couldn't help but think. Then he picked up the Arrogance card and aimed it at the goddess of the mind's eye. 3 seconds later, the dark golden radiance completely illuminated the face of the goddess. The third eye that was ordered to close suddenly opened and absorbed the radiance of the Arrogance card, as if it was thirsting for it. As the Arrogance emblem was imprinted on the forehead, the goddess of the mind's eye was marked with the Great Sin emblem. Its temperament began to sublimate at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although there wasn't the slightest change on the surface, it gave off a feeling of being completely reborn. When the Arrogance card's radiance was completely absorbed, it closed its eyes again. However, its face was already showing signs of spirituality. Just like when the Bichimos gained sentience, the divine aura of the goddess of the mind's eye, which was almost undetectable, rose to a point where it could be detected. Hypostasis +1 undoubtedly appeared on its interface. However, all 3 of its eyes were closed. After gaining sentience, it stood quietly on the spot, not moving at all. The purple radiance that leaked out from the gap of the tightly shut third eye was slowly turning golden. Dake realized that the goddess of the mind's eye was still transforming. He couldn't help but wait with rapt attention. It wasn't until about 3 minutes later that the purple radiance in the third eye completely transformed into a golden radiance. Dake immediately took out the fantastical beast, goddess of the mind's eye, to check. The data on the surface of the magic card didn't change at all. However, when he infused magic to check, he discovered that the outer circle of the card surface was emitting a golden radiance. The fantastical beast, goddess of the mind's eye, had upgraded from a purple card with only 2 surekill skills to a golden card with 4 surekill skills. Dake was instantly stunned. It was the first time he had seen such a phenomenon where the Great Sin card was able to upgrade a magic card by 2 levels just by gaining sentience. The appearance of this phenomenon immediately shook some of his previous judgments about the Great Sin card. He had always believed that the Great Sin card did indeed have some kind of ability to gain sentience. However, what if the effect of gaining sentience was just a side effect of a greater ability? The 2 transformations of the Bichimos and the fantastical beast, goddess of the mind's eye, made him realize something. Could it be dependency? It's just like how vampires turn humans into their own dependents after the embrace. So the true function of the Great Sin card is to turn the magic fairy into a being similar to the demon god's dependents. The moment this thought arose, it couldn't be stopped. Dake even forgot to check the new surekill skill of the fantastical beast, goddess of the mind's eye, and put the goddess of the mind's eye aside for a long time. After a while, he came back to his senses and looked at the goddess of the mind's eye, whose 3 eyes were tightly shut. He pretended to cough and said, "Ahem, can you speak?" Then the goddess who had just obtained hypostasis, with her eyes still closed, uttered a single word. Yes. Very good. Dake said excitedly. Being able to speak the human language was actually a very important ability. If Meow Meow could speak the human language, it would definitely be a perfect assistant. So, Dake asked, do you understand yourself? As expected, the goddess of the mind's eye slowly shook its head. It wasn't the moon god's soul, but a god created from nothing by Dake. Dake asked again, why do you have to close your eyes? The goddess of the mind's eye replied in an indifferent voice, to obey master's orders. Dake, I just want you to close your third eye, okay? Pride only made the goddess of the mind's eye cold. Dake made it open its eyes and move freely. Then he finally started to check the sure-kill skills of the fantastical beast, goddess of the mind's eye. The 4 sure-kill skills were Fusion Finger, Angel's Fusion, Mind's Eye, and God's Eye. Fusion Finger and Angel's Fusion were basically unchanged. Dake directly looked at the 3rd sure-kill skill, Mind's Eye. Mind's Eye. The goddess of the mind's eye can see through the heart. When it opens its 3rd eye, it can see through everything and see through all illusions. Mana plus 500, Hypostasis plus 1. See through the heart, see through everything, see through all illusions. Dake's eyebrows twitched, and he immediately realized the practicality of this sure-kill skill. See through the heart, in short, was heart peak. See through everything was X-ray. See through all illusions was illusion break. Heart peak, X-ray, and illusion break. These 3 effects were all very practical, especially heart peak. According to the strength of heart peak, it could tell whether the other party was lying or not, to the extent that it could hear the other party's thoughts. However, these 3 effects were all concentrated in one sure-kill skill. Mind's Eye was indeed a godly skill with Hypostasis plus 1 passive. As for the mana plus 500 that came with it, it wasn't that important. Dake revealed a smile and looked at the 4th sure-kill skill, God's Eye. Both were sure-kill skills related to the eye, but God's Eye was stronger than Mind's Eye just from its name alone. However, it wasn't the strengthened version of Mind's Eye, but a sensing skill that had nothing to do with it. God's Eye. The goddess of Mind's Eye can use the power of God to see the flow of chi and use it to see the opponent's vital points, making it easier to deal a fatal blow. In addition, when the goddess of Mind's Eye opens the God's Eye, she will be very sensitive to the flow of God's chi, and can greatly increase her perception of divinity. Mana plus 500, Hypostasis plus 1. After looking at the last sure-kill skill, Dake's smile suddenly froze. If this were a manga, there would be a lot of question marks above his head right now. This God's Eye, in addition to being a sure-kill skill, was actually the same as Mind's Eye, with the 2 effects of Mana plus 500 and Hypostasis plus 1. Moreover, these 2 effects could obviously be stacked. This 1 plus 1 naturally equaled 2. The final values were Mana plus 1000 and Hypostasis plus 2. Mana plus 1000 wasn't too exaggerated. God's personality armament. S passive even increased all 3 stats by 1000. However, Fantasy Beast, Goddess of Mind's Eye was only a 1-star first-tier magic elf card. Moreover, it still had a secondary card. The probability of refining 2 cards at once meant that it would be further strengthened sooner or later. As for the Hypostasis plus 2, needless to say, right? A 4th-tier magic elf with Hypostasis plus 1 would be able to reach the legendary God's level. Moreover, Hypostasis plus 2? Its current Hypostasis was already equivalent to a 3rd-tier magic elf card. Today was really an eye-opener. Not only did I use the Great Sin card to turn a magic elf card from a purple to a gold card, but Hypostasis plus 2 also appeared. Dake shook his head and calmed himself down. Although Mana plus 1000 and Hypostasis plus 2 looked terrifying, the real use of God's Eye wasn't in this. It wasn't even in increased critical hit rate. Using this God's Eye can find God. He understood this small effect almost immediately. If he had the God's Eye when he was looking for the 2nd Moon God Temple, he would definitely be able to find it faster and easier. Other than that, it could also be used to find divine items with divinity. Maybe I can go to the secret passage again? Dake looked up at the mind's eye goddess, who was communicating with the magic elves through her eyes, and his thoughts became more and more quick-witted. Back then, he was able to find the second moon god temple, because there were traces to follow. Now that he had the god's eye of the mind's eye goddess, he might be able to find other types of temples or divine items. The secret passage had existed for so many years, so it was impossible that there were only 2 moon god temples. If he could find a new temple, even if there were no treasures inside, just the murals, totems, and decorations in the temple would bring him great benefits. Don't rush, calm down and think about it. Dake put down the card and started to think. About 15 minutes later, the mind's eye goddess was released from her cold state, and her face suddenly became soft and gentle. Dake thought about it and summoned the moon god's soul to his dorm. The moon god's soul saw the mind's eye goddess as soon as it returned. The 2 magic elves seemed to have a natural attraction to each other, and they quickly gathered together. Among Dake's magic elves, the moon god's soul was very special, and it had always been out of place. Now that the mind's eye goddess was here, it finally had a companion. Seeing that they were chatting happily, Dake said meaningfully, "Since you 2 are so close, how about you be in charge of its basic education?" The moon god's soul. Of course, there was no reason to refuse. Dake saw the moon god's eye goddess purse its lips and added, "It can sense the flow of divine energy and the existence of divinity. If I'm not wrong, you'll be relying on it to forge your divinity." The moon god's soul's expression changed greatly, and it became even more enthusiastic towards its natural best friend. It didn't know that the mind's eye goddess had the ability to see through souls. Chapter 652. While the goddess of the moon and the goddess of the mind's eye were talking, Dake tried to use Pride 3 to upgrade the other fantasy beast, goddess of the mind's eye. The result was still successful. Pride 3 and Pride X didn't show any difference in this aspect. The second fantasy beast, goddess of the mind's eye, had the same changes as the first one, except that it didn't have sentience. Out of caution, Dake didn't perform second refinement on the second fantasy beast, goddess of the mind's eye. His idea was to store it for the time being and wait until he was familiar with second refinement, or after he refined more fantasy beast, goddess of the heart's eye, then he would consider it. Fantasy beast, goddess of the mind's eye, had a high practical value, so it was better to keep as many as possible. After the upgrade, Dake summoned the goddess of the mind's eye to his side and tested its mind's eye ability in front of the goddess of the moon. The result of the test was satisfactory. The mind's eye ability wasn't as good as Professor Kazayer's mind's eye ability, so it couldn't accurately read the other party's thoughts, but it could vaguely sense the other party's thoughts. Remember the URL. MVIP, can't you? Vias for whether the other party was lying, emotional changes, hostility, and so on. It could be completely sensed. However, the core secret of this ability was that it could see the other party's affection level. This was the affection level system that every dating game had. While Dake was surprised, he also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Isn't this affection level system of yours a little too late? In the end, he didn't need this thing anymore. Plus, the mind's eye ability couldn't quantify affection level, so it didn't have much meaning. Dake didn't insist on it. He then tested the mind's eye, X-ray, and illusion break abilities and found that X-ray would be disrupted when it encountered barriers or magic barriers. However, if it was normal items without magic, it would be able to penetrate them. Then, what about the walls in the dungeons and secret tunnels? Dake couldn't help but think. Although the walls of the dungeon and the secret passageway were made of mana, it still needed to be tested to see if it could be penetrated. If they could penetrate through it, even if their vision would be limited, it would be of great help to the exploration of the underground city and the secret passage. These 2 goddesses with a heart's eye came at the right time. When the test was over, Dake asked the moon god to bring the goddess of the heart's eye to meet the other elves and find a room in the club's classroom. It wasn't a burden for him to replenish the mana of a 1-star magic elf card. However, before it was incorporated into the Paradise system, it still needed to be stored into the magic card every night. After sending the goddess of the heart's eye away, Dake continued reading and researching. He didn't restart the experiment until after dinner. Since he had no more material cards to experiment with, he had no choice but to continue refining the fantasy beast. Fortunately, the efficiency of 2 cards in 15 minutes was not low. Even if he took the rest time in between, he still managed to refine 6 fantasy beast cards in an hour. These 6 fantasy beast cards were 2 fantasy beast, Ibu, 2 fantasy beast, fantasy sheep, 1 fantasy beast, spell fusion creature, dark, and 1 fantasy beast, spell fusion creature, light. His luck was pretty good. All 6 cards were materials that could be used for experiments. Based on his current speed, these 6 fantasy beast cards could be used until tomorrow. The next Thursday it was finally time for Kazayer's alchemy class. When Dake thought that today's class would be as boring as usual, Professor Kazayer announced the topic of this class: golem creation. Alchemists were different from the orthodox mage profession. They mostly needed specific materials to perform alchemy, and if they ran out of materials, they would lose the ability to protect themselves. The golem was created to deal with this situation. As for people who later used the golem in various fields, it was inevitable that times would develop. However, with the retirement of alchemists, the refining process of the golem was gradually lost. The golem circulating in the market today were mostly products of the previous era. However, according to Professor Kazayer's explanation, the golem and the magic elf had some similarities, especially for the mechanical type. Therefore, studying the golem was also helpful for the improvement of magical technology. The reason why Dake wanted to study the golem was different from the others. He wanted to use this to study armament and armament evolution. The so-called armament evolution in Digimon referred to the use of fighter spirit to evolve into Digibeast. Dark, on the other hand, had already converted it into a finished product, God Personality Armament, Moon God. However, his success had too many coincidences. If he wanted to replicate it further, he would need more research. Alchemy was a necessary step on the road to success. And even if he didn't care about this, the Magister could actually use the curse cage to seal the golem into a magic card and transform it into a magic elf. Therefore, during this lesson, he listened very seriously and even accidentally increased greed. At the end of the alchemy class, Professor Kazayer assigned homework related to the golem and announced the year-end assessment. Everyone had to refine a product close to the patrol golem level. If the students could complete the year-end assessment goal before the end of the semester after the alchemy class was completed, they could graduate early. As for the patrolling golem of the academy, it was a sequence 3 simulated grade golem in the degree of realism classification of golems. In other words, it was a product that was similar to real life and had simulated thought circuits, with an intelligence level of 2.5. The golem craftsmanship basically gathered all the elements of alchemy. It was extremely difficult to create a high-quality golem. However, the students present were all elites, so it wasn't impossible. Professor Kazayer would start teaching the students how to make the golem starting from the next week's alchemy class. Of course, it would start from the most basic, mimic level. This was the advantage of being an academic. They didn't have to spend a lot of time figuring it out themselves. After the alchemy class ended, Dake spent half an hour in the library to finish his homework. He then rushed back to the dorm without stopping to continue the second refinement experiment. After nearly a week of high-intensity experiments, he had more or less grasped some of the tricks of second refinement. When he was refining Illusory Beast, Ibu a second time, there were already examples of him being close to success. Although he still failed in the end, he finally saw some hope. Humans were such creatures. As long as there was a bit of light in the darkness, they could raise their feet. He used up all the Illusory Beast in the afternoon, and his mastery of the second refinement increased once again. The astrology class in the evening was the same as usual. The next day, Friday, Dake woke up early in the morning and started refining. Recently, greed had increased quite a bit, but it was still within a controllable range. It was just 8 o'clock, and he had already refined 6 Illusory Beast cards. Among the 6 Illusory Beast cards, there were 3 Illusory Beast, Earbook cards. Then there was 1 Illusory Beast, Ever-Changing Monster, 1 Illusory Beast, Fantasy Sheep, and 1 Illusory Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Dragon. The appearance of the 3 Illusory Beast, Earbook cards wasn't a surprise. As Dake's desire for Illusory Beast, Earbook grew stronger, he clearly felt that his chances of refining it had increased. What really surprised him was Illusory Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Dragon. This brand new magic card, according to his guess, shouldn't have existed. Because in Yu-Gi-Oh!, Curse Fusion Creature only had 3 types, Light, Dark, and Earth. But in fact he didn't refine Illusory Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Earth. Instead he refined Illusory Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Dragon. Card name, Illusory Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Dragon. Type, Elf. Card level, race, Elemental. Attribute, Dragon. Magic power, 100, attack, 100, defense, 100, ultimate skill, Fusion Finger, Dragon Fusion, including the fusion materials indicated by Curse Fusion Creature, Dragon. Offer this set of fusion materials as a sacrifice to summon the corresponding Dragon Elemental Magic Elf of this set of fusion materials. Since there was even a Dragon Elemental, why couldn't there be other attributes? The types of Illusory Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, were obviously more varied than Dake had imagined. And the moment he confirmed this, Illusory Beast, Curse Fusion Creature, Dragon, Dake suddenly had a flash of inspiration and remembered an important point that he had neglected before. The prerequisite for Fusion Finger was to first record the existing fusion materials and then replace them during the fusion. In other words, it was impossible to create something out of nothing. But what if a set of fusion materials were all magic elves of the same name? Among them, the most typical example was Frowny Face Blue Eyes White Dragon plus Blue Eyes White Dragon plus Blue Eyes White Dragon plus Fusion equals Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. Did this mean that as long as he prepared 2 Blue Eyes White Dragons, coupled with any fusion material card with Fusion Finger, ability and a fusion card, he could fuse them into a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon? And going one step further, Dake vaguely remembered that the fusion form of Blue Eyes White Dragon was not only limited to Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. It seemed that as long as there were 2 Blue Eyes White Dragons, they could also fuse into a 2-headed dragon? In addition, even if there was only 1 Blue Eyes White Dragon, it seemed that it could also fuse with any other Dragon Clan monster to form some kind of dragon? At this moment, Dake's thoughts suddenly became clear. He suddenly realized that he actually still had a lot of experiments that he had not done yet. Given his current magic card, even if it only lasted for 30 seconds, he could still replicate the Blue Eyes White Dragon. He could totally use the Blue Eyes incarnation for fusion experiments. Of course, as the Blue Eyes White Dragon was a 9-star magic elven at the 3rd tier, he guessed that ordinary fusion would not work. But what if it was a Blue Eyes Young Dragon? In concept, the Blue Eyes Young Dragon was originally the infant of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Since the Blue Eyes White Dragon was a fusion material, shouldn't the Blue Eyes Young Dragon also be a fusion material? In that case, Blue Eyes Young Dragon plus Blue Eyes Young Dragon plus Blue Eyes Young Dragon plus fusion equals Blue Eyes Ultimate Young Dragon? Or perhaps, Blue Eyes Young Dragon plus Blue Eyes Young Dragon plus fusion equals XX 2-headed Young Dragon. Another example was Blue Eyes Young Dragon plus Dragon Seed plus fusion equals Blue Eyes XX Young Dragon? In addition, since it was also a magical fantasy beast, could it be used as a fusion material after the transformation? It was different from magical fantasy beast, fantasy sheep, and other fusion materials that were temporarily limited to level 1. Magical fantasy beast could transform into a level 2 beast. Once this setting was accepted, the number of operations that could be done would suddenly increase. The flaw of magical fantasy beast was that it could only transform perfectly when the target was in front of it. Therefore, it was definitely different from the usage of magical fantasy beast, fantasy sheep. But what if it did not transform into a black Diru beast, or a Diru beast, but transformed into a Blue Eyes Young Dragon that was present at the same time. Blue Eyes Young Dragon plus Magical Fantasy Beast Blue Eyes Young Dragon plus fusion equals XX Two-Headed Young Dragon? The above speculation could be tested on the spot. When Dake speculated up to this point, he could not help but want to know if this speculation could be tested. If it could be realized, he might be able to fuse into a higher-level white dragon. This was obviously a direction to achieve a breakthrough, but he had always neglected it. 8:00 sharp. Dake glanced at the wall clock and quickly made a decision. The experiment of second refinement could be done at any time. Now he had to confirm whether Magical Fantasy Beast could be used as a fusion material. Then he immediately said to Magical Fantasy Beast, that was reading in the dormitory, "Get ready, we're going to the club classroom." Busy. The Magical Fantasy Beast blinked in confusion. It did not understand why its master was suddenly so excited. But Dake was obviously impatient. He looked at the Magical Fantasy Beast's procrastination. Suddenly, he bent down and scooped it up onto his arm like a monkey scooping up the moon. Then he pushed the door open and left. On Friday morning, the flow of people in the castle was not dense. Dake quickly arrived at the club classroom. Then he woke up the Blue Eyes Young Dragon that was sleeping lazily and rode it to the top of the spiral clock tower. Standing at the top of the spiral clock tower, he took out fusion. Then he told the two magic elves his thoughts. The Magical Fantasy Beast and the Blue Eyes Young Dragon instantly widened their eyes. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.